My wife and her sisters were planning to make me watch 5 kids over Christmas, so I changed my plans. What happened next made her gasp. "What? This can't be happening!" The coffee maker gurgled in the pre-dawn darkness, a sound I'd come to associate with strategic planning rather than comfort. December 18th, 7 days until Christmas. I stood in our kitchen, watching the first pale thread of winter light leak through the window above the sink, and I knew with the kind of certainty that settles in your bones like cold that this would be the last Christmas I spent apologizing for existing in my own home. My wife, Jennifer, was still asleep upstairs. So were our 2 kids, Emma and Jack, 7 and 5 respectively. In exactly 48 hours, her sisters would arrive with their children. Madison with her 3 boys, ages 3, 5, and 8. Stephanie with her twin daughters, just turned 4. 5 additional children. 5. The number had been repeating in my head for weeks, like a mathematical proof of my own irrelevance. "It's just for a week," Jennifer had said back in October when the plan was first mentioned. We'd been folding laundry, and she hadn't even looked up from the basket of tiny socks. My sisters haven't had a real break in years. Madison's going through the divorce. Stephanie's husband is deployed. We have the space. Space. As if space were the only resource required to host 5 children under 9 for 7 days during Christmas. As if time, energy, sanity, and the last shreds of my dignity weren't also necessary ingredients in this recipe for disaster. I'd nodded. I always nodded. That was my role in this marriage, in this family, in this carefully constructed hierarchy where my position had been established so gradually I hadn't noticed until the foundation was already poured and set. The coffee finished brewing. I poured myself a cup and sat at the kitchen table, pulling out my phone. I had 17 unread messages in the family group chat, all from last night. I scrolled through them with the detachment of an anthropologist studying a culture I no longer belonged to. "Can't wait for next week. The boys are so excited to see their cousins. Thank God for this. I'm literally running on fumes. You guys are lifesavers. That's what family is for. Daniel's already planning activities with the kids." That last message stopped me cold. Not because it was a lie, though it was, but because of how casually Jennifer had volunteered my time, my energy, my entire Christmas week, as if I were a communal resource to be allocated at will. I hadn't planned a single activity. I'd barely been consulted about the visit at all, beyond the initial mention in October. Since then, the plans had evolved in a parallel universe of group texts and phone calls that I was peripherally aware of but never actually included in. I'd catch fragments. Daniel can take them to the park in the afternoon. Daniel's good with crafts. Maybe he can do something with that. Daniel can watch them while we go to the spa. Daniel can. Daniel will. Daniel's there. So why not use him? The thing about becoming invisible is that it happens slowly, like a photograph left in the sun. You don't notice the fading until one day you realize you're just an outline, a suggestion of a person, useful for your shape but no longer expected to have substance. I heard movement upstairs. The creaking floorboard outside Emma's room, Jennifer, was up. I had maybe 10 minutes before she came down, before the day's momentum carried us forward into another round of preparations, another day of me nodding while plans were made around me, about me, without me. I opened my laptop. The bank accounts appeared on screen, neat columns of numbers that told a story Jennifer didn't know I'd been reading. Joint checking, joint savings, my retirement account, her retirement account. And there, the one she'd forgotten about, or perhaps never really noticed, my inheritance account. My grandfather had left me a substantial sum when he died 4 years ago. Jennifer knew about it, of course, but in that vague way people know about things that don't directly impact them. It was Daniel's account, money that existed in the background of our financial life, but was never discussed, never planned for, never counted in the family calculations. $147,000. Not life-changing money for most people, perhaps, but enough. Enough for what I'd been planning since the moment I saw that text message volunteering my Christmas week without my consent. I pulled up the second tab I'd had open for 3 weeks, a luxury cabin resort in the mountains, 3 hours north. I'd driven past it once on a work trip and filed it away in the mental folder labeled Impossible dreams. Private hot tub. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a frozen lake. Complete silence except for wind in the pines. The cursor hovered over the Book Now button. Jennifer's footsteps on the stairs made me close the laptop. I took a sip of coffee, arranged my face into its default expression of mild pleasantness, and waited. She came into the kitchen wearing my old college sweatshirt and pajama pants, her hair in a messy bun. There was a time when this sight would have made my heart do something complicated and pleasant. Now I just noticed she was wearing my sweatshirt and would probably leave it in a heap on the bathroom floor for me to pick up later. "You're up early," she said, heading straight for the coffee maker. "Couldn't sleep. Nervous about next week?" She poured her coffee, added cream and sugar, 2 spoons, like always. I knew her patterns better than my own. "Don't worry, we've got it all figured out. Madison's bringing their tablets for quiet time, and I made a schedule for activities. You'll mostly just need to supervise while they're playing." Supervise. Such a neat, clean word. As if 7 children didn't create chaos that required constant intervention, negotiation, crisis management, and cleanup. As if supervising didn't mean breaking up fights, preventing injuries, mediating toy disputes, and somehow keeping them all alive and relatively happy for 7 days straight. "About that," I started. She wasn't listening. She'd pulled out her phone and was scrolling through something, her coffee cup raised to her lips. "Oh, I meant to tell you, I invited Mom and Dad for Christmas dinner. They haven't met Madison's boys since the separation, and I thought it would be nice to have everyone together. You don't mind cooking, right? You do that turkey thing so well." The turkey thing. Thanksgiving had been 3 weeks ago. I'd spent 2 days preparing a meal for 12 people, including her parents, both sisters, and all the children. I'd done all the shopping, all the prep, all the cooking, and most of the cleanup. Jennifer had made a sweet potato casserole and acted as if we'd split the labor equally. Her mother had complimented the meal, and Jennifer had said thank you, as if the compliment belonged to both of us. "Actually," I said, setting my coffee cup down with more force than intended. The sound made her look up. "I need to talk to you about Christmas." Something in my tone must have registered because she actually put her phone down. "What's wrong?" This was the moment. I could feel it hovering in the air between us, this pivot point where everything would either stay the same or irrevocably change. I thought about backing down, explaining it away as stress, agreeing to everything like I always did. The old Daniel, the one who'd been fading like a photograph in the sun, would have swallowed it all and smiled. But I'd been up since 4 in the morning, drinking coffee in the dark and counting the cost of my own invisibility, and something in me had calcified into something harder than agreement. "I'm not going to be here for Christmas," I said. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the refrigerator's hum, the distant sound of a car passing on the street outside, the blood rushing in my own ears. Jennifer laughed. Not a real laugh, a confused, dismissive sound. "What do you mean? Daniel, this isn't funny. Everyone's coming in 2 days." "I know when they're coming. I'm telling you I won't be here." She set her coffee cup down, and I watched her face transform through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, annoyance, and finally something that might have been the first flicker of actual attention she'd paid me in months. "You can't be serious." I've never been more serious about anything in my life. "But," she gestured vaguely at the kitchen, the house, the entire infrastructure of the life we'd built, Christmas, the kids, my sisters, everyone's counting on you. There it was. The truth spoken plainly. Everyone was counting on me. Not, "We need you," or "We'd miss you," or "You're important to us." Everyone's counting on you. Like I was a service being provided, a utility that was expected to function regardless of whether anyone checked if it was still connected to a power source. "They'll have to count on someone else," I said. Jennifer's face was doing something complicated now, cycling through emotions faster than I could track. "Where would you even go? This is insane, Daniel. You can't just leave." "I can. I have a reservation at a cabin up north. I'm leaving tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow?" Her voice pitched higher. "Christmas is in a week. The kids, what am I supposed to tell Emma and Jack? It was interesting that she led with that question rather than asking what she was supposed to do with 7 children and no help. Interesting that her first concern was the narrative, the explanation, how to frame my absence rather than the actual implications of it. Tell them the truth, I said. Tell them Dad needed some time alone. Time alone? She was standing now, her hands flat on the kitchen table, leaning toward me. You get time alone every day. You work from home 3 days a week. You have your office. You have time. I almost laughed. The office that served as a storage room for her seasonal decorations and craft supplies. The work-from-home days where I was expected to let in delivery people, start dinner prep, and be available for any domestic crisis that arose. The time that wasn't actually time because I was always on call, always available, always expected to be in service. That's not the same thing, I said quietly. Then what is this really about? Her eyes were narrowing now, suspicion replacing confusion. Is there someone else? Is that what this is? The accusation should have stung, but it just made me tired. Of course she'd go there. Of course she'd make this about betrayal rather than breakdown, about my moral failing rather than her complete inability to see me as a person with needs rather than a function with responsibilities. There's no one else. There's barely even me anymore. She blinked at that, and for a second I thought I saw something like recognition flicker across her face. But then it was gone, replaced by a harder expression I knew well, the one she used when she decided I was being unreasonable and just needed to be managed back into compliance. We'll talk about this later, she said, picking up her phone. After the kids are up, you're just stressed. Once you think about it rationally. I booked the cabin 3 weeks ago, I interrupted. This isn't a spontaneous decision. I've thought about it very rationally. I'm leaving tomorrow. And I'll be back the day after Christmas. The phone slipped from her hand, clattering onto the table. 3 weeks? Her voice was barely a whisper. You've been planning this for 3 weeks and didn't tell me? About as long as you've been planning to use me as free childcare for 7 kids without asking if I wanted to do it. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's not we didn't. She stopped, regrouped. This is different. This is family. You don't just abandon family. Abandon. The word hung in the air between us, like smoke. Is that what you think this is? I asked. Abandonment? What else would you call it? Leaving your wife and kids at Christmas? To what? Hide in the woods by yourself? That's not normal, Daniel. That's not what people do. Normal. I'd built an entire life trying to be normal, acceptable, easy to live with. I'd filed down every sharp edge of my personality until I was smooth and featureless, a man-shaped object that wouldn't snag on anyone's expectations. And somehow I'd filed myself down to nothing. People do it all the time, I said. They're just usually men who matter enough that their families care when they leave. The cruelty of it surprised even me. Jennifer's face went pale, then flushed. That's not fair. Isn't it? I stood up, taking my coffee cup to the sink. The normalcy of the gesture felt absurd under the circumstances, but I did it anyway. When's the last time you asked me what I wanted? Not about logistics or schedules or what needed to be done, but what I actually wanted. Silence. The kind that answers questions. That's what I thought, I said softly. Upstairs, I heard Emma's door open, her small feet padding toward the bathroom. The house was waking up. Soon, Jack would be up. And then there would be breakfast to make, backpacks to check. The usual morning chaos that would swallow this conversation whole and carry us forward into another day of the life we'd been living. Except I wasn't going to live it anymore. I turned back to Jennifer. She was still standing at the table, her hands braced against it like she was trying to hold something up or keep something down. When she looked at me, her eyes were bright with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were sad or angry. I'm asking you not to do this, she said, and her voice cracked on the last word. Please, Daniel, don't do this to us. To us. As if I were the one doing something to them, rather than finally doing something for myself after years of doing everything for everyone else. I have to, I said, and I was surprised to find my own voice gentle. I'm sorry, Jennifer, but I have to. I left her standing in the kitchen, and went upstairs to wake the kids for school. Behind me, I heard her phone buzz, probably Madison or Stephanie in the group chat, probably asking about some detail of next week's plans that I'd no longer be around to execute. The notification sound seemed very far away, like something happening in a life I'd already left. Tomorrow morning, I'd pack a bag. I'd drive 3 hours north to a cabin with floor-to-ceiling windows and complete silence. I'd spend Christmas alone, and I'd figure out if there was enough of me left to rebuild into something more substantial than a shadow. And Jennifer and her sisters would have to figure out how to manage 7 children without me. The thought should have made me feel guilty. Instead, I felt something I barely recognized anymore: hope. The elementary school drop-off line moved with its usual glacial pace, a parade of SUVs and minivans inching forward while children spilled out onto the sidewalk like colorful confetti. Emma unbuckled herself and leaned forward between the front seats, her breath warm on my cheek. "Dad, you're still coming to my winter concert, right? It's on Thursday." Thursday, 2 days from now, the day her aunts and cousins would arrive. The day I'd planned to be 3 hours north, watching snow fall on a frozen lake instead of watching my marriage continue its slow-motion collapse. I glanced at Jennifer in the passenger seat. She was staring straight ahead through the windshield, her jaw set in that particular way that meant she was furious but performing normalcy for the children. We'd barely spoken since the kitchen conversation, communicating through the shorthand of routine: cereal bowls, lunchboxes, backpacks, the mechanical choreography of parents who'd forgotten how to be partners. "We'll talk about it tonight, sweetheart," I said, which wasn't an answer, and we both knew it. Emma's face fell. She was 7, old enough to sense the tension that had filled our house like water rising, but young enough to still believe that if she asked the right question in the right way, she could fix whatever was breaking. "But you have to come," she insisted, her voice climbing toward panic. "I have a solo part. My Avalize. I'm singing Silent Night by myself. Mrs. Patterson said I'm the best singer in the class." Jennifer turned then, and the look she gave me was sharp enough to draw blood. It said, You see what you're doing? You're going to break your daughter's heart over what? A tantrum? A midlife crisis? Your bruised ego?" "Dad will figure it out," Jennifer said to Emma, her voice bright and false as costume jewelry. "Won't you, Dad?" The question was a trap. Every possible answer was wrong. If I said yes, I was surrendering, agreeing to stay, to let the cabin reservation lapse, to spend Christmas exactly as everyone else had planned without my input. If I said no, I was the villain of this story, the selfish father who'd rather hide in the woods than watch his daughter sing. What Jennifer didn't understand, what she'd maybe never understood, was that I'd been living in a trap for years. This was just the first time I'd noticed the bars. "I'll try, baby," I said finally. "I promise I'll try." Emma brightened a little, choosing to hear promise rather than equivocation. She kissed my cheek, grabbed her backpack, and tumbled out of the car. Jack followed, 5 years old and still young enough that his world was simple. Dad was Dad, and Dad would always be there. He didn't ask questions. He just waved and ran after his sister. We watched them disappear into the school building, swallowed by the crowd of children and the fluorescent light of the hallways. The moment they were out of sight, Jennifer turned to me, and her voice was ice. "You're really going to miss her concert?" It wasn't a question. We were past questions now, into the territory of accusations and judgments. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." She was gathering her purse, her phone, preparing to exit the car, even though we were still in the drop-off line with 3 cars ahead of us. "You've already made your decision. You're going to drive off to your cabin and leave me to explain to a 7-year-old why her father doesn't care enough to watch her sing. That's not fair." "Fair?" She laughed, sharp and bitter. "You want to talk about fair? Let's talk about abandoning your family a week before Christmas. Let's talk about leaving me alone with 7 children while you what? Find yourself? Have an eat, pray, love moment in the woods? Grow out, Daniel." The car behind us honked. The line had moved forward. I put the car in gear, navigated through the remaining drop-off queue, and pulled out onto the main road. Jennifer was still staring at me, waiting for a response, for capitulation, for me to break under the weight of her disappointment. "I'm not trying to find myself," I said quietly. "I'm just trying to remember that I exist." "That's the same thing dressed up in different words. It's selfish either way." Selfish. There it was again, the cardinal sin of family life. To want something for yourself, to prioritize your own needs over the collective good, to say no when everyone else was counting on your yes, that was selfishness. That was the betrayal that couldn't be forgiven. "When's the last time you asked me what I needed?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the road. Not about the house, not about the kids, not about logistics. When's the last time you asked about me? Silence. The kind that has weight and texture. "I ask you things all the time," she said finally, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. "You ask if I can do things, if I'll handle things, if I mind taking care of things. You treat me like a personal assistant who happens to live in the house." I turned onto our street, the familiar route home that suddenly felt like a path I'd walked for too long without questioning the destination. "When's the last time you asked me if I was happy?" I felt her looking at me, really looking, maybe for the first time in months. When she spoke, her voice was smaller, uncertain. "Are you not happy?" The question landed in my chest like a stone dropping into a well, and I waited to hear it hit bottom. The echo took longer than I expected. "I don't know," I admitted. "I've been too busy being useful to figure out if I'm happy." We pulled into the driveway. Our house looked exactly like every other house on the street. Two-story colonial, white siding, black shutters, a wreath on the door that Jennifer had hung 2 weeks ago while I'd held the ladder. A life that looked perfect from the outside, like a stock photo of suburban contentment. Jennifer didn't move to get out of the car. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, staring at the house like she was seeing it for the first time. "I don't understand what happened," she said softly. "When did everything get so bad?" It didn't happen all at once. I turned off the engine, and the silence that rushed in felt like a presence. It was 1,000 little moments. Every time you made plans without asking me, every time you volunteered my time like it belonged to you, every time you treated my needs like they were optional while yours were mandatory. "I never." She stopped, and I watched her face as she ran through her mental catalog of recent history, testing my words against her memory. "I always thought we were a team." We were. But somewhere along the way, it became a team where one person made all the decisions and the other person just executed them. "That's not true." "Jennifer," I said her name like a period at the end of a sentence. "When did you tell your sisters they could come for Christmas week?" "October. You know that." "And when did you ask me if that was okay?" She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, and I could see her scrolling back through the conversation in October, looking for the moment when she'd sought my permission or input or even my opinion. I knew what she'd find. Nothing. She'd mentioned it was happening. I'd nodded. She'd taken the nod as agreement rather than surrender. "You didn't say you had a problem with it," she said finally, but her voice was defensive now, the certainty crumbling. "I shouldn't have to say I have a problem with something to be consulted about it. That's not how partnerships work." "Fine." She was getting angry again, rebuilding her walls. "So I should have asked. I'll ask next time. Is that what you want? Gold stars for communication?" "I want you to see me." The words came out rawer than I'd intended, and I heard my voice crack on the last syllable. "I want you to remember that I'm a person with my own thoughts and feelings and needs, not just a supporting character in your life." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were tears of recognition or resentment. Maybe both. Maybe she was realizing what I'd already known for months, that we'd built something that looked like a marriage, but functioned like a corporation, with clearly defined roles and a hierarchy that had calcified without either of us noticing. "I don't know how to fix this," she whispered. "Neither do I. That's why I need to leave. Running away doesn't fix anything." "I'm not running away. I'm creating space to think." In a luxury cabin, the tears had stopped, and now her voice was acid again. Poor Daniel, so oppressed, going to suffer in a hot tub with a mountain view. You think I don't deserve it? I think your timing is impeccable. I think choosing the week your family needs you most to take a vacation is a pretty clear statement about your priorities. Family, needs, priorities. Every word was designed to activate my guilt, to remind me of my obligations, to pull me back into the gravity well of expectations I'd been orbiting for years. My family hasn't needed me, I said quietly. They've needed my labor. There's a difference. Jennifer flinched like I'd slapped her. She grabbed the door handle, then paused, her hand trembling. I thought we were happy, she said, not looking at me. I thought everything was fine. I know you did. That's the problem. She got out of the car without another word, and I watched her walk to the house, her shoulders rigid with anger or grief or both. The front door closed behind her with a sound that seemed very final. I sat in the driveway for a long time after that, watching the sun climb higher in a sky that was the particular shade of blue that means it's cold enough to hurt. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, already knowing what I'd find. The family group chat had exploded overnight. 47 new messages. I'm packing the boys' stuff today. They're literally bouncing off the walls with excitement. Thank you again for doing this. You guys are saints. Quick question. Do you have a pack and play? Forgot ours is at my mom's house, and the twins still nap better in one. Of course. We have everything you need. Daniel's going to set up the basement as a play area. Daniel will. Daniel has been assigned this task without his knowledge or consent, and everyone assumes he'll do it because that's what Daniel does. I scrolled further back to messages from 3 days ago. Can Daniel pick us up from the airport? Our flight gets in at 3:30 on Thursday. Definitely. He'll be there. You guys are lifesavers. Honestly don't know what we'd do without you. That's what family is for. Family. That word kept appearing, wielded like a weapon to enforce compliance. Family means sacrifice. Family means putting others first. Family means shutting up and doing what's expected because to do otherwise is selfishness, is betrayal, is proof that you're not a good person. But nobody had asked if I was okay with being sacrificed. Nobody had checked if I wanted to put others first. Nobody had considered that maybe, just maybe, I was also family, and maybe I also deserved consideration. I opened my email and pulled up the cabin reservation. The confirmation stared back at me. December 20th through December 27th. 7 days of solitude. 7 days to remember what my own thoughts sounded like without the constant static of other people's needs drowning them out. The cabin was paid for. Non-refundable. I'd used money from my inheritance account, money that was mine and mine alone, earned through the grief of losing my grandfather, the only person who'd ever seemed to see me clearly, who'd looked at me and asked, "But what do you want, Daniel?" and then waited for a real answer instead of filling the silence with expectations. My phone buzzed again. A text from Jennifer, not in the group chat. "We need to talk about this. Really talk. Please." I stared at the message for a long time. There was a version of this story where I went inside, where we sat down and had the conversation she was asking for, where I explained and she listened and we found some compromise that left everyone slightly dissatisfied but still functional. There was a version where I was reasonable. But reasonable was what had gotten me here. Reasonable was what had erased me, one small concession at a time, until I was a ghost in my own life. I texted back, "I'm leaving tomorrow morning. We can talk when I get back." The response was immediate. "What about Emma's concert?" My hands hovered over the keyboard. The concert. Thursday evening. Silent night. Her solo. Her face when I'd promised I'd try. I could drive back for it. Leave the cabin. Drive 3 hours south. Watch her sing. Drive 3 hours north again. It would be one evening. A few hours of my week of solitude sacrificed for my daughter. Except I knew how it would go. I'd come back for the concert, and Jennifer would take it as proof that I was wavering. She'd push. Her sisters would arrive and see me there, and they'd assume I'd stayed, that the plans were still on, that Daniel had come to his senses. And I'd be trapped, watching my escape route close because I couldn't say no to a 7-year-old's face. "I'll call her Thursday night," I typed. "I'll explain." The phone rang immediately. Jennifer calling, not texting. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. It went to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it rang again. I answered. "You can't do this." Her voice was shaking, pitched high with emotion. "You cannot miss your daughter's concert. That's not Daniel. That crosses a line." "A lot of lines have been crossed," I said. "I'm just the first one who's saying it out loud. Duna 5. Cree Provict. Duna 5. Cree Provict. Cree Provict. This isn't about me, or my sisters, or any of that anymore. This is about Emma. She's 7 years old, and she's counting on you. Emma counts on me every day. I'm there for breakfast, for homework, for bedtime stories, for everything. Missing one concert doesn't make me a bad father. It does if you're missing it to prove a point. I'm not proving a point. I'm trying to survive." The silence that followed was different from the others. This one felt like something breaking, a crack running through ice that had been solid for years. "I don't know you anymore," Jennifer said finally, and her voice was soft with something that might have been grief. "The man I married wouldn't do this." "You're right." I agreed. "He wouldn't. He'd swallow it all and smile and die a little more inside while everyone else got what they wanted. Is that who you want me to be?" "I want you to be someone who doesn't hurt his daughter to make a point about being unappreciated." "Then maybe you should have appreciated me when it wouldn't have come to this." I hung up before she could respond, and the silence in the car was so complete it felt like a living thing. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. I felt like I'd just jumped off a cliff and was waiting to see if there was water below or just rocks. Through the windshield, I could see our house. Christmas lights along the roof line that I'd hung 3 weeks ago. The wreath on the door that I'd held the ladder for. The mailbox I'd repaired last summer when a car had clipped it. Every inch of this property bore the marks of my labor, my time, my presence. But nowhere, I realized, was there any mark of me, of the person I was beneath all the doing, of my dreams or desires or the parts of myself I'd locked away because there was no room for them in the life we'd built. Tomorrow morning, I'd pack a bag. I'd get in this car and drive north until the city disappeared behind me and there was nothing but trees and snow and silence. I'd miss Emma's concert, and I'd have to live with that. I'd hurt her, and that knowledge sat in my chest like a stone. But if I stayed, if I gave in now, I'd hurt myself. And I'd been doing that for so long, I'd forgotten it was even possible to choose differently. The front door of the house opened. Jennifer stood there, her phone in her hand, watching me, waiting to see what I'd do. I could see the question on her face, even from this distance. "Are you really going to do this?" I started the car. Her face crumpled, and she turned and went back inside, the door closing with a sound that echoed in the quiet suburban morning. I sat there for another moment, my hands on the steering wheel, and I thought about all the versions of myself I'd tried to be: the good husband, the helpful brother-in-law, the reliable father, the man who never complained, never pushed back, never asked for more than he was offered. That man had disappeared so gradually I hadn't noticed until there was nothing left but the shape of him, a hollow space where a person used to be. Tomorrow, I'd start trying to fill that space with something real. But today, I had packing to do. The house felt different when I walked inside. Not physically, everything was exactly where it had always been. Emma's backpack hung on the hook by the door, Jack's toy truck scattered across the living room floor. The scent of Jennifer's coffee still lingering in the air. But something had shifted, some invisible membrane between the before and the after, and I was standing on the wrong side of it. Or maybe, for the first time in years, I was standing on the right side. Jennifer was in the kitchen, aggressively loading the dishwasher with the breakfast dishes we'd left in the sink. She didn't look up when I came in. The silence between us was thick enough to choke on, but I'd spent enough years reading her moods to know that speaking now would only detonate whatever bomb she was carefully constructing from her anger and hurt. I went upstairs to my office. Our office, technically. Though the hour had become increasingly theoretical as Jennifer's craft supplies and seasonal decorations had colonized every surface except my desk. I closed the door and sat down at my computer, pulling up the spreadsheet I'd been maintaining for the past 3 weeks. The document was titled Christmas Week Analysis, and it contained 3 tabs. Tab 1, the schedule Jennifer and her sisters had created in their group chat, which I'd pieced together from fragments of conversation and screenshots. Tab 2, my estimated time commitment for each activity. Tab 3, what I'd actually agreed to versus what had been assumed. I'd started this spreadsheet as an exercise in sanity, a way to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy, that my resentment was based on something concrete rather than some character flaw or deficit of generosity. Looking at it now, the numbers were almost funny in their absurdity. Total estimated hours of childcare, 87.5 hours over 7 days. That worked out to 12.5 hours per day for 7 children ages 3 to 8. Activities I'd been volunteered for without consultation. 23. Number of times I'd been asked if I wanted to do any of this. 0. I took a screenshot of tab 3, the one comparing agreed upon versus assumed commitments. Then I opened a new document and started typing. To Jennifer, Madison, and Stephanie. I'm writing this because I need you to understand that my decision to leave isn't impulsive or irrational, despite how it might appear. I've spent the past 3 weeks trying to find a way to explain what I'm feeling, and I keep coming back to a simple truth. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being a person in this family and became a function. I paused, reading the words back. Too harsh? Too dramatic? But no, dramatic would be screaming, would be slamming doors, would be any of the theatrical displays of emotion that got labeled as losing it or having a breakdown. This was just truth, stated plainly. If the truth was uncomfortable, maybe that said something about the situation rather than about my delivery of it. I kept writing. For Christmas week, you made plans that required 87.5 hours of my time. I've attached a breakdown of the schedule you created. At no point was I asked if this was feasible or if I wanted to do it. I was simply informed that it was happening, and my agreement was assumed because that's what I do. I agree. I've spent so many years agreeing that I forgot I had the option to say no. I'm saying no now. Not because I don't love my family, not because I don't care about my nieces and nephews, but because I'm drowning, and if I don't take myself out of the water, I'm going to sink so deep I'll never find my way back up. I'll be back December 27th. We can talk then about what happens next. But right now, I need you to understand that this isn't about punishing anyone. It's about saving myself. Daniel. I attached the spreadsheet and saved the document without sending it. I decide later whether to actually deliver it or if writing it was enough, a way to organize my thoughts into something coherent rather than the roiling mess of anger and guilt and grief that had been sitting in my chest like acid. A knock on the door made me close the laptop. Jennifer didn't wait for an invitation before opening it. Another small erosion of boundaries that I'd never pushed back on because it seemed petty to care about something so minor. Except minor things accumulate. They build up like sediment until you're buried under the weight of 1,000 small invasions you never objected to. Madison just called, she said without preamble. She wanted to confirm you're picking them up from the airport tomorrow. I turned in my chair to face her. She was leaning against the doorframe, her arms crossed, her face carefully neutral. This was her negotiation posture, the one she used with difficult clients at work when she needed to stay professional despite wanting to scream. I won't be, I said simply. So, what am I supposed to tell her? Tell her the truth. Tell her I'm not going to be here. Jennifer's neutral expression cracked slightly. You want me to tell my sister, who's going through a divorce and hasn't had a break in 6 months, that you've decided to abandon us right before Christmas? I want you to tell her that I have other plans. Plans, she said the word like it was something disgusting she'd found stuck to her shoe. What kind of plans could possibly be more important than your family? Plans that involve me remembering I'm allowed to exist outside of what this family needs from me. She pushed off from the doorframe, walking into the office with the precise, controlled movements of someone who's very angry, but trying not to show it. She sat down in the chair across from my desk, the chair that was usually buried under storage bins of Christmas decorations, and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "When did I become the enemy?" she asked quietly. The question caught me off guard. I'd been prepared for anger, for accusations, for guilt trips. I hadn't been prepared for this sudden vulnerability, this crack in her armor that let me see the actual person underneath. "You're not the enemy," I said, and I meant it. "You're just so focused on managing everything that you forgot to check if I was okay with being managed. I'm not trying to manage you. I'm trying to keep our lives running. And who asked you to do that alone?" "You." She stopped, and I watched her face as she ran through the argument she'd been about to make and realized it didn't hold water. "You were always okay with it. You never complained." "I shouldn't have to complain to be considered. That's not how this is supposed to work." Jennifer looked down at her hands, folded in her lap. Her wedding ring caught the light from the window, white gold, simple and elegant, chosen 13 years ago, when we'd both been different people living in a different world. I wondered if she remembered that day, if she remembered the vows we'd made about partnership and mutual respect and seeing each other as equals. "I got your text," she said after a long moment, "about Emma's concert." My chest tightened. "Jen, don't." She held up a hand. "Don't explain it again. I heard you the first time. Her voice cracked. "I just need you to know that if you miss that concert, she's going to remember it forever. Not the time you made pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse. Not the time you stayed up all night building her science fair project. She's going to remember the time her dad wasn't there when she sang her solo." The guilt hit like a physical thing, a weight settling on my chest. I'd known this would be the hardest part. Not Jennifer's anger, not the inconvenience to her sisters, but the look on Emma's face when she scanned the audience and didn't see me. "I know," I said quietly. "And you're still going? If I don't go now, I never will. And if I never do this, never take this step, then I'm going to keep disappearing until there's nothing left. Is that what you want? For me to stay but not really be here? To be a ghost who makes pancakes and picks people up from the airport but doesn't have any internal life of his own? That's not." She stopped again, and I could see her struggling with something. "Is that really how you feel? Like a ghost?" "Yes." The word sat between us like a confession. Jennifer looked at me for a long time, and I saw something shifting behind her eyes, some calculation, some reassessment of the landscape of our marriage. "I didn't know," she said finally. "I swear to God, Daniel, I didn't know you felt like this." "I know you didn't. That's part of the problem. So what? You're punishing me for not being psychic?" "I'm not punishing anyone. I searched for the right words. I'm just trying to stop the bleeding before I lose everything." "You're not losing anything. You have a family who loves you, a home, kids who adore you. I have all of that." I interrupted, "And I'm still drowning. Do you understand how terrifying that is? To have everything you're supposed to want and still feel like you're suffocating?" Jennifer's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back angrily. "No, I don't understand. I don't understand how you can have 2 healthy children and a wife who works her ass off to provide for this family and still act like you're some kind of victim." There it was, the word I'd been waiting for her to use. Victim. As if acknowledging pain meant claiming victimhood. As if saying "I'm not okay" was somehow an act of aggression against everyone who was depending on me to be okay. "I'm not a victim," I said quietly. "I'm just tired, and I need a break." "Everyone's tired, Daniel. That's called being an adult. That's called having responsibilities." "You're right. Everyone is tired. But not everyone is expected to set themselves on fire to keep other people warm. That's so dramatic, is it?" I opened my laptop and pulled up the spreadsheet, turning the screen so she could see it. 87.5 hours of childcare in 1 week. Tell me which part of that is dramatic. Jennifer stared at the spreadsheet, her face going pale as she scrolled through the tabs. I watched her eyes move across the numbers, the schedule, the breakdown of assumed versus agreed upon commitments. The silence stretched out, punctuated only by the click of her scrolling. "I didn't realize," she said finally, her voice small. We were talking about activities and schedules, and it all seemed." "Reasonable?" I suggested. "Manageable?" Because it is, if you assume I have no other purpose in life except to facilitate everyone else's needs. That's not what we assumed. Then what did you assume? That I'd just be thrilled to spend my Christmas week managing 7 children while you and your sisters got spa days and shopping trips? Her face flushed. We were going to help. We weren't just going to dump everything on you. Really? Because here's the schedule you made. I pointed to a specific section. Tuesday afternoon. Daniel takes all kids to the park while we go to the Christmas market. Wednesday, Daniel supervises craft time while we get pedicures. Thursday evening, Daniel handles dinner and bedtime while we have sister time. We were just trying to get some time together. We haven't seen each other in months. I understand that. What I don't understand is why your time together had to come at the expense of my entire week. Jennifer closed the laptop, pushing it back toward me like it was something toxic. What do you want from me, Daniel? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry we didn't ask you first. I'm sorry we assumed you'd be okay with it. I'm sorry for every single thing I've apparently done wrong. Is that enough? I'm sorry we didn't ask you first. No. Create. The word came out harder than I'd intended, and Jennifer flinched. Then what? What do you want? I want you to understand that this isn't about getting an apology. This is about a pattern. This is about years of my needs being optional while everyone else's were mandatory. This is about being erased so gradually that I didn't notice until I looked in the mirror one day and couldn't recognize the person looking back. So you're leaving to find yourself? Is that it? This is some kind of eat, pray, love bullshit? Why does everyone keep saying that? Why does wanting time alone automatically mean I'm having some kind of crisis? Maybe I'm the only one who's not in crisis. Maybe I'm the only one who's being honest about the fact that this isn't working. This, Jennifer's voice went sharp, this marriage? You're saying our marriage isn't working? I'd walked us right to the edge of something I wasn't sure I was ready to fall into. The truth was hovering there between us, waiting to be spoken or swallowed. I could feel the weight of it, the enormity of actually saying out loud what I'd been thinking for months. I'm saying I don't know anymore, I admitted. I don't know if it's working or if we're just going through the motions because it's easier than admitting something's broken. Jennifer stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. She walked to the window, staring out at our backyard where Jack's swing set stood like a monument to domestic normalcy. I need to think about this, she said, without turning around. I can't have this conversation right now. Okay, but you're still leaving tomorrow? Yes, she nodded, still not looking at me. Then I guess there's nothing else to say. She left the office, closing the door behind her with a soft click that somehow felt more final than if she'd slammed it. I sat alone in the room, surrounded by Christmas decorations and craft supplies and the accumulated debris of a life I'd been living on autopilot. My phone buzzed. A text from Madison in the group chat. T-minus 36 hours until chaos mode. Can't wait to see everyone. Below that, Stephanie had replied, The twins are literally vibrating with excitement. Thank you guys so much for hosting. You're the best. And Jennifer, before our conversation, we're so excited. Daniel's already planning activities. It's going to be magical. I stared at that last message, at the way Jennifer had spoken for me. Committed my time and energy with such breezy confidence. The old Daniel would have read that message and felt the weight of obligation settling onto his shoulders like a yoke. The old Daniel would have spent the next 36 hours figuring out activities, making schedules, preparing the house for an invasion of children. But I wasn't the old Daniel anymore. Or maybe I was finally becoming the real Daniel, the one who'd been buried under years of accommodation and compromise and silent surrender. I opened my suitcase and started packing. Warm clothes, books I'd been meaning to read for 2 years, my journal, the good coffee beans I kept hidden in the back of the pantry because if I left them out, they'd be gone in a week. Everything I'd need for 7 days of solitude. As I packed, I could hear Jennifer moving around downstairs, water running in the kitchen, the clink of dishes, the familiar sounds of our domestic life continuing despite the earthquake that had just split the foundation. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a direct text from Jennifer. At least call Emma tonight. Prepare her. Don't just disappear. She was right. Emma deserved that much. Jack was young enough that he'd probably just accept my absence as one of those inexplicable adult things, but Emma would need an explanation. She'd need something to hold on to that wasn't just, "Dad left." I texted back, "I will. After dinner." No response. I hadn't expected one. I finished packing, zipped the suitcase, and set it by the door of the office. Tomorrow morning, early, before the kids woke up, I'd load it into the car. I'd leave a note on the kitchen table. I'd drive north until the city disappeared in my rearview mirror and there was nothing ahead but road and trees and the promise of silence. And then I'd figure out if there was enough of me left to rebuild into something more substantial than a shadow. The afternoon stretched ahead, heavy with waiting. I had 30 hours until I left. 30 hours to finish preparing, to have the conversation with Emma, to withstand whatever final attempts Jennifer would make to change my mind. 30 hours until I either saved myself or destroyed everything. I suspected it might be both. Dinner was a performance art piece titled "Family Pretending Everything is Normal." Jennifer made spaghetti, Emma's favorite, and we all sat around the table like we'd done 1,000 times before. Jack chattered about his day at school, something involving a frog, and a minor classroom catastrophe. Emma was quieter than usual, pushing pasta around her plate while stealing glances at me and then at Jennifer, her 7-year-old radar picking up the frequency of tension humming between us. "Dad," Jack said through a mouthful of garlic bread, "can we build a snowman tomorrow if it snows?" Jennifer and I both opened our mouths at the same time, then stopped, waiting to see who would answer. The silence lasted just a beat too long. Emma's fork stopped moving. "We'll see about the weather, buddy," Jennifer said finally, her voice carefully cheerful. "Finish your dinner. But Dad's really good at snowmen. He makes the best carrot noses." The innocence of it hit me like a punch. Jack had no idea he was walking through a minefield. He just knew his dad made good snowmen, and tomorrow might snow, and the logical conclusion was that we'd go outside and build something together. The simplicity of a 5-year-old's worldview, where love was measured in snowmen and carrot noses. "Actually, sport," I said, and my voice came out rougher than I'd intended. "I'm going to be away for a few days." Jack blinked at me, processing. "Away where?" "Just a trip. I'll be back soon." "Like Mommy's work trips?" Jennifer's work trips usually lasted 2 or 3 days, and she always came back with small presents and stories about hotel room service. I could see her tensing, waiting to see how I'd frame this, what narrative I'd construct. "Something like that," I said, which was both true and completely false. "Okay." Jack accepted this with the easy resilience of young childhood and went back to his spaghetti. Crisis averted, at least for him. But Emma was still watching me, her brown eyes, Jennifer's eyes, seeing more than I wanted her to see. "When are you leaving?" she asked quietly. "Tomorrow morning, early." "Before my concert?" The table went silent, except for the sound of Jack slurping noodles. Jennifer's fork clinked against her plate as she set it down, her hands folding in her lap. I could feel her willing me to change my mind, to look at our daughter's face and realize what I was about to do. "Yes, sweetheart, before your concert." Emma's face did something complicated, a flicker of confusion, then hurt, then a careful blankness that killed me because I recognized it. It was the same expression I'd been wearing for years, the mask you put on when you need to hide how much something hurts. "But you promised you'd try." "I know, and I'm sorry. Something came up that I can't move." "What came up?" She was 7. But she wasn't stupid. She knew adults lied to children, smoothed over the complicated truths with easy fictions. "What's more important than my concert?" Jennifer made a small sound, quickly suppressed. Jack looked up from his plate, finally sensing that something was wrong. "Is Dad in trouble?" he asked Jennifer. "No, baby. Dad's just..." She looked at me, and her eyes were saying 100 things I couldn't decode. "Dad has to take a trip." "For work?" Emma pressed. This was it. The moment where I could lie, could construct some fiction about an urgent work thing, an unmissable meeting. Anything that would let me be the dad who wanted to be there but couldn't, rather than the dad who chose to leave. Emma would be hurt either way, but the lie would give her something to hold on to that wasn't rejection. I looked at Jennifer. She was watching me, with an expression that might have been hope. Hope that I'd back down, that seeing Emma's face would be enough to make me stay, that I'd choose them over whatever selfish need had driven me to this point. Not for work, I said slowly. I just need some time alone, to think. Think about what? Emma's voice was getting smaller, younger. Adult stuff, complicated stuff. Are you and Mom getting divorced? Jennifer gasped. I felt the air leave my lungs. What? Jennifer said. No, Emma, no. Why would you think that? Because that's what happened with Aunt Madison. Uncle Steve said he needed time to think, and then they got divorced. The logic was airtight. Emma had been watching, learning, constructing her understanding of the world from the patterns she observed. And now, her dad was using the same language, exhibiting the same behavior, and her child's brain was making the obvious connection. "We're not getting divorced," Jennifer said firmly, but I noticed she didn't look at me when she said it. "Dad just needs a short break, like a vacation. Why doesn't he want us to come?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Why didn't I want them to come? What kind of father needed a vacation from his own children? What kind of husband needed distance from his wife badly enough to miss his daughter's concert? "It's not that I don't want you," I started, but Emma interrupted. "Then why are you leaving?" 7 years old, and she'd cut straight to the heart of it. I looked at her across the dinner table. This little person Jennifer and I had made, who had my stubborn chin and her mother's eyes, who sang in the school choir and still believed in the tooth fairy, and was now learning that the adults in her life would disappoint her in ways she couldn't yet understand. "Because sometimes," I said carefully, "even when you love people very much, you need time by yourself to remember who you are. I know who you are. You're my dad." The simplicity of it broke something in me. To Emma, I was dad, and dad was a complete identity, a full person. She couldn't yet understand that beneath the role was a human being who'd lost himself somewhere along the way. "You're right," I said, and my voice cracked. "I am your dad, and I love you more than anything in the world, but I also need to take care of myself so I can be a better dad." "You're already a good dad." Jennifer made another sound, turning her face away. Jack had stopped eating entirely, looking between Emma and me like he was watching a tennis match he didn't understand the rules of. "Thank you, baby," I said. "That means everything to me, but I still need to do this." Emma's eyes filled with tears, and I watched her fight them back with the fierce determination she'd inherited from me, the need to not show weakness, to not let people see when they'd hurt you. She was 7 years old and already learning to swallow her pain to make things easier for the adults around her. "I hate you," she whispered, and then she pushed back from the table and ran upstairs. The sound of her bedroom door slamming echoed through the house like a gunshot. Jack burst into tears immediately, the emotional contagion of his sister's distress overwhelming his ability to process what was happening. Jennifer scooped him up, holding him against her shoulder while he sobbed. "Is Emma okay?" he cried. "Is Dad leaving forever?" "No, baby, not forever. Just a few days." Jennifer was crying too now, silent tears streaming down her face while she rocked Jack and stared at me across the debris of our family dinner. "Dad's coming back soon." I stood up, my legs unsteady. "I should go talk to her." "Should you?" Jennifer's voice was ice. "Or should you just practice leaving, since that's what you're so committed to doing?" The cruelty of it landed, but I couldn't even be angry. She wasn't wrong. I was practicing leaving. I'd been practicing for weeks, mentally, emotionally, and now physically. The difference was that I'd been leaving slowly, incrementally, dying by degrees for years. This was just the first time anyone had noticed. I went upstairs anyway, each step feeling like walking through water. Emma's door was closed, and I could hear her crying on the other side, not the wild, uncontrolled sobbing of a younger child, but the muffled, suffocated kind that meant she was crying into her pillow, trying to hide even her grief. I knocked softly. Emma, can I come in? No. Please, sweetheart. I need to talk to you. You said everything already. You're leaving, and you don't care about my concert, and that's it. I tried the door. Unlocked. I opened it slowly and found her face down on her bed, her shoulders shaking. The room was exactly as she'd left it that morning. Art projects covering her desk, stuffed animals arranged on her shelves with the precise order of a 7-year-old's hierarchy, her choir dress hanging on the closet door ready for Thursday night. The dress killed me, navy blue with white trim, carefully ironed by Jennifer 3 days ago. Emma had tried it on and twirled in front of the mirror, asking if I thought she looked like a real singer. You look like a star, I'd told her. Will you take pictures at my concert? She'd asked. Of course, promises made before I'd fully accepted what I was about to do. Promises I was about to break. I sat on the edge of her bed, not touching her, just present. I do care about your concert. Then stay. Her voice was muffled by the pillow. I can't. Why not? How do you explain to a 7-year-old that you're suffocating? That you've been disappearing so slowly you didn't notice until you looked down one day and realized you were barely there? That love isn't always enough when you've lost yourself completely? It's complicated, I said, which was the coward's answer, the adult's way of saying, I don't want to explain this to you. Emma rolled over, and her face was blotchy and red, her eyes swollen. Is it because of me? What? No. Emma, no. Because I'm not good enough? Because I didn't clean my room like you asked? Because I talked back last week? The guilt crashed over me like a wave. She was 7 years old and already internalizing this as her fault, already doing the arithmetic of her own inadequacy to explain why her father would choose to leave. Listen to me. I reached for her hand, and she let me take it. This has nothing to do with you. You are perfect. You are the best thing I've ever done in my entire life. You and your brother, you're everything. Then why don't you want to be with us? I do want to be with you, but I also need. I stopped, searching for words that would make sense to her. You know how sometimes you need quiet time in your room? Even though you love playing with Jack, sometimes you just need to be by yourself? She nodded, uncertain. That's what this is. Grown-up quiet time. Except I need a little more of it than an hour in my room. How much more? A week. She was quiet for a long moment, processing. That's a really long quiet time. I know. I'm sorry. Will you call me? While you're gone? Every day, I promise. And you'll come back? Absolutely. I promise. When? December 27th. That's after Christmas. I know. Another long silence. Then, are you and Mom getting divorced? There it was again. The question that was haunting this whole conversation. The specter of Madison and Steve's dissolution hanging over everything. I don't know what's going to happen with me and Mom. I said honestly, because I'd already lied to her enough. But no matter what happens, I'm always going to be your dad. I'm always going to love you. That never changes. That's what Uncle Steve said, too. I didn't have an answer to that. She was right. Uncle Steve had probably said exactly that, and then he'd moved to an apartment across town, and now Emma's cousins shuffled between 2 houses every week. I can't promise I know how everything's going to turn out, I said. But I promise I'm not leaving you. I'm just leaving for a little while to figure some things out. Emma pulled her hand away from mine and sat up, wiping her nose on her sleeve. I still think you should come to my concert. I know, and I'm sorry I won't be there. But Mom will take pictures, and I want you to call me right after and tell me all about it, every single detail. Deal? I guess. And when I get back, we'll do something special. Just you and me. Whatever you want. Really? Really. She thought about this, her face serious. I want to go ice skating and have hot chocolate after, the fancy kind with whipped cream. Done. And I want you to let me beat you at Uno. Even though you hate losing, despite everything. I smiled. I don't hate losing. You make a face. I do not make a face. You do. Like this. She scrunched up her face in an exaggerated grimace that was apparently her impression of me losing at cards. I look nothing like that. You do, though. We sat there for a moment. the crisis diffused slightly by the familiar rhythm of our banter. But then Emma's face got serious again. "Dad, are you sad?" The question caught me off guard with its directness. "Sometimes." "Is that why you're leaving? Because you're sad?" "Partly. I get sad sometimes too. But Mom says it's okay to be sad. She says feelings are just visiting. They don't stay forever." Out of the mouths of babes. Jennifer had given Emma wisdom. I'd apparently forgotten how to access that feelings were temporary, that emotional states weren't permanent conditions. Except my sadness wasn't visiting. It had moved in years ago and set up permanent residence. "Your mom's right," I said. "But sometimes sad feelings stick around longer than they should, and you need help figuring out how to feel better." "Is that what you're doing? Figuring out how to feel better?" "Yes." "Okay." She laid back down, turning on her side to face me. "I still wish you weren't going, and I'm still mad at you." "That's fair. You're allowed to be mad. But I love you." The tears I'd been holding back finally broke through. "I love you too, Emma girl. So much. Even when I'm mad at you." "Especially when you're mad at me." She reached out and took my hand again, her small fingers wrapping around mine. We stayed like that for a while, not talking, just existing in the same space while the house settled around us and the weight of tomorrow morning pressed down like snow accumulating on a roof. Eventually, Jack appeared in the doorway, still hiccuping from his crying jag downstairs. "Is everybody okay now?" "Come here, buddy," I said, and he climbed onto the bed, wedging himself between Emma and me. I put an arm around each of them, holding them close, trying to memorize this moment, the weight of them, the smell of Emma's strawberry shampoo and Jack's lingering scent of playground dirt. Jennifer appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with her arms crossed. Her face was carefully blank, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of holding everything together while I prepared to fall apart. "Bedtime," she said softly. "School tomorrow." "Can Dad stay until we fall asleep?" Emma asked. Jennifer's eyes met mine across the room. In that look was a whole conversation. "Is this what you want? To have these moments and then throw them away? To hurt these children who love you unconditionally? To break this family apart because you need to find yourself?" But also, underneath the anger and hurt, I saw something else. Exhaustion that matched my own. The weariness of holding up a structure that was already crumbling. Maybe she was as tired as I was. Maybe she just didn't know how to say it yet. "Dad can stay," she said finally. "But then I need to talk to him." The kids didn't notice the tension in her voice. They snuggled closer to me, already getting drowsy with the quick drop into sleep that only children can achieve. I stayed with them, telling them stories, singing the lullabies they'd loved since they were babies, being Dad for as long as I could before I had to become Daniel again, the man who was leaving tomorrow, the man who was choosing himself over the easy comfort of staying. By the time they were both asleep, it was fully dark outside. I extracted myself carefully, tucking the blankets around Emma and carrying Jack to his own room. Jennifer watched from the hallway, silent. When I came out of Jack's room, she was still there, waiting. "We need to talk," she said. "I know. Downstairs." I followed her down to the living room, and we stood facing each other like strangers, like two people who'd forgotten how to be married somewhere between the first "I love you" and now. Tomorrow morning, I was leaving. Tonight, we had to figure out what that meant. The living room felt different at night. The Christmas tree we decorated together 2 weeks ago cast strange shadows across the walls, its lights blinking in their preset pattern, 3 seconds on, 1 second off, repeat. I'd spent an hour untangling those lights while Jennifer directed from the couch and the kids argued about ornament placement. A typical evening in our typical life, except nothing about this moment was typical. Jennifer sat on the couch, her legs curled under her, a glass of wine in her hand that I hadn't seen her pour. She gestured to the bottle on the coffee table, an offer, or maybe just an acknowledgement that this conversation would require fortification. I poured myself a glass and sat in the armchair across from her. Not next to her. The distance felt important, a physical manifestation of the emotional geography we'd been mapping for months without realizing it. "I talked to Madison," Jennifer said without preamble. Told her you wouldn't be here tomorrow. My stomach dropped. What did you say? That you had a work emergency. That you had to fly out unexpectedly for a client crisis. She took a sip of wine, her eyes never leaving my face. I lied for you, to my sister, who's going through hell right now and was counting on us. I didn't ask you to lie. What was I supposed to say? Actually, Daniel's decided to abandon us for a week because he's having some kind of breakdown? That would have gone over well. It's not a breakdown. Then what is it? Her voice rose, and she immediately checked herself, glancing toward the stairs. When she spoke again, it was quieter, but no less intense. Explain it to me, Daniel. Make me understand why you're willing to hurt our children, inconvenience my family, and potentially destroy our marriage just to hide in a cabin by yourself. I'm not hiding. Then what are you doing? The question hung between us, and I realized I didn't have a simple answer. How do you explain drowning to someone who doesn't realize you've been underwater? How do you describe suffocation to someone who's been breathing fine? I'm trying to remember what it feels like to make a choice that's just for me. I said finally, not for the kids, not for you, not for your sisters, or the house, or anyone else. Just for me. Do you understand how long it's been since I've done that? That's what marriage is, Daniel. Compromise. Sacrifice. Putting the family first. I've been putting the family first for 13 years. When do I get a turn? A turn? She laughed, sharp and bitter. This isn't a game. You don't get turns at being selfish. Why not? You do. The words were out before I could stop them, and I watched Jennifer's face transform shock, then fury, then something colder and more dangerous. Excuse me? I could have backed down, should have, probably, but I was so tired of swallowing words, of smoothing things over, of being the reasonable one who never pushed back. Your girls' trips, your spa days, your sister time while I watch the kids. When you decide you need a break, it's self-care. When I need one, it's abandonment. Those are a few hours, Daniel. Maybe a weekend. You're talking about missing Christmas. There's a difference. The only difference is scale. The principle is the same. You're allowed to prioritize yourself sometimes, but I'm not. Because the timing is insane. My sisters are going through crises. Emma has her concert. Christmas is in 5 days. You couldn't have picked a worse time if you'd tried. There would never be a good time, I said quietly. There's always something. Someone always needs something. If I wait for the perfect moment when nobody will be inconvenienced by my needs, I'll wait forever. Jennifer set her wine glass down hard enough that I was surprised it didn't break. So, this is really happening. You're really going to do this? Yes, even though I'm asking you not to. Even though. She stood up, pacing to the window that looked out over our dark backyard. The motion sensor light kicked on, illuminating the swing set, the trampoline, all the infrastructure of childhood we'd built together. I don't know what happens after this, she said, her back to me. I don't know how we come back from you, choosing yourself over your family. Maybe we don't come back from it. Maybe we move forward to something different. She turned, and her face was streaked with tears. I hadn't heard her cry. You want a divorce. Just say it. I don't know what I want. That's the truth. I don't know if I want a divorce, or if I want to stay married, or if I want something in between that doesn't have a name yet. I just know I can't keep living like this. Like what? In a nice house, with a family who loves you, having meals together and putting the kids to bed, and living an actual life? God, Daniel, do you know how many people would kill for what you have? I know how lucky I am. The words exploded out of me. I know I have everything I'm supposed to want. That's what makes it so terrifying. I have everything, and I'm still miserable. What does that say about me? Jennifer sat back down, suddenly deflated. When did you get so unhappy? The question was softer than I expected, genuinely curious rather than accusatory. I don't think it was one moment, I said. It was gradual. Like, you know how you can stand in the rain for a long time and not notice you're getting wet until suddenly you're soaked through? It was like that. And you never thought to say anything? I did, in small ways. I'd mention I was tired, or stressed, or needed help, and you'd hear it as, I don't know, weather. Something to acknowledge and move past, not as a real problem that needed solving. That's not fair. I always tried to help when you asked, but I shouldn't have to ask. That's what I'm trying to explain. In a real partnership, you notice when your partner is drowning. You don't wait for them to formally request a life preserver. So now I'm a bad wife because I'm not psychic? You're not a bad wife. You're just busy, focused on managing everything. And somewhere in all that managing, you forgot to check in with me as a person rather than as a function. Jennifer was quiet for a long moment, turning her wine glass in her hands. I'm scared, she said finally, her voice small. I'm scared you're going to leave and realize you like being alone more than you like being with us. I'm scared you're going to come back different or not come back at all. I'm scared this is the beginning of the end. The vulnerability in her voice cracked something open in me. This was the Jennifer I'd fallen in love with, not the efficient manager of household logistics, but the woman underneath who was scared and hurt and trying to hold everything together. I'm scared too, I admitted. I'm scared I've already lost so much of myself that there's nothing left to salvage. I'm scared I'm making a huge mistake. I'm scared I'm going to hurt everyone I love and it won't even fix anything. Then don't go. I have to. Why? Because I'm more scared of what happens if I stay. The silence that followed was different from the others, heavier, more final. I could feel us both sitting with the reality of what I'd just said. That staying felt more dangerous than leaving. That the known misery had become worse than the unknown risk. What do you want me to tell people? Jennifer asked eventually. Your parents are going to call. My parents will be at Christmas dinner. What do I say when everyone asks where you are? Tell them the truth. I needed time away. And when they ask why, tell them we're figuring things out. They're going to think we're getting divorced. Maybe we are. Jennifer flinched. Don't say that. Why not? Isn't that where this is heading? You said it yourself. You don't know if we can come back from this. That doesn't mean I want it to be true. She was crying again, not bothering to hide it now. I don't want to lose you, Daniel. Even if I've been terrible at showing it. I don't want this marriage to end. Then something has to change. We can't keep doing this dance, where I disappear and you don't notice until I'm almost gone. So tell me what to change. Give me a list. Tell me what to fix. It's not about a list. It's about, I struggled for the right words. It's about seeing me, really seeing me. Not as dad or husband or the person who handles things, but as a whole person with needs and wants and limits. I do see you. Do you? When's the last time you asked me about something I cared about that had nothing to do with the house or the kids? When's the last time you were curious about my inner life? Jennifer opened her mouth, then closed it. I watched her scroll through her mental catalog of recent conversations, searching for evidence to contradict me. The fact that it was taking this long was evidence enough. I ask about your work, she said finally. You ask if my projects are done, if my deadlines are manageable, if my schedule will conflict with something the family needs. You don't ask if I'm enjoying what I'm doing, or if I'm fulfilled, or if I have dreams bigger than quarterly reports, because you never talk about that stuff. You never bring it up, because you never seem interested. Every conversation we have is about logistics. Who's picking up the kids? What's for dinner? Did I remember to pay the electric bill? When do we ever just talk? We're talking right now. Because I'm leaving, this conversation only exists because I forced it. If I'd just stayed and gone along with Christmas week, we'd never have talked about any of this. We'd have kept sleepwalking through our marriage, until one day we woke up and realized we were strangers. Jennifer set her wine glass down and put her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook with silent crying. And I felt the familiar pull to comfort her. To fix this. To make it better. But I stayed in my chair, maintaining the distance, because if I went to her now, I'd cave. I'd surrender. I'd promise to stay and we'd go back to the way things were, and I'd continue disappearing until there was nothing left at all. I don't know how to fix this, she said through her hands. I don't know what you want from me. I want you to let me go tomorrow without making me feel like a monster. I want you to use this week to think about whether you actually want to be married to me, or if you just want to be married to the idea of an intact family. And I want you to be honest with yourself about whether you've been happy either. She looked up at that. What? Have you been happy, Jennifer? Really? Truly happy? Or have you also just been going through the motions because it's easier than examining whether this is actually working? She stopped, and I could see the question landing, taking root. I don't know. I thought I was. But now you're asking, and I don't know. Then maybe we both need this week to figure that out. Apart from each other? Sometimes you need distance to see things clearly. Jennifer pulled a throw pillow into her lap, hugging it like a shield. What if we figure out different things? What if you come back wanting to leave, and I've figured out I want you to stay? Then we'll deal with that. How? I don't know. Therapy, maybe. Mediation. We figure it out like adults. Adults who are getting divorced. Maybe. Or maybe adults who are trying to save a marriage that's worth saving. I don't know yet, Jen. That's what I'm trying to figure out. She nodded slowly, and I could see her trying to shift her mental framework, to move from fighting my departure to accepting it. What am I supposed to do with 7 kids for a week? Call in reinforcements. Your mom. My mom. Hire help. I don't know. Figure it out the same way you'd figure it out if I actually had a work emergency. That's different. Why? Because you'd be gone for a reason I couldn't resent you for. At least she was being honest. I appreciated that, even as it stung. You're allowed to resent me, I said. You probably should resent me. I'm making your life harder so I can make mine easier. That's a reasonable thing to be angry about. Then why are you doing it? Because sometimes you have to choose yourself, even when it hurts other people. And I've spent so long never choosing myself that I've forgotten how. Jennifer looked at me for a long time, and I saw something shifting in her expression. Not acceptance, exactly, but maybe the beginning of understanding. Or resignation. It was hard to tell the difference. I'm going to be so angry at you, she said quietly. This whole week, I'm going to be furious every single time I have to explain where you are, or manage something that should be your job, or see Emma's face when she realizes you're really not coming back for her concert. I know. And when you come back, we're going to have to talk. Really talk. No more avoiding things or pretending everything's fine. Okay. And if we can't fix this, if we try and it doesn't work, then we need to be honest about that too. Agreed. She stood up, and I thought maybe she was going to come to me. But instead, she picked up her wine glass and the bottle. I'm going to bed. I assume you'll be gone before I wake up? Probably. Then I guess this is goodbye for now. Jen, don't. She held up a hand. Don't make this harder than it already is. Don't apologize again or explain again or try to make me feel better about it. Just go tomorrow and do whatever it is you need to do, and we'll figure out the rest when you get back. She walked to the stairs, then paused with her foot on the bottom step. For what it's worth, she said without turning around, I hope you find what you're looking for. I hope whatever's waiting for you in that cabin is worth what you're giving up to get there. Then she went upstairs, and I was alone with the blinking Christmas lights and the remains of our marriage scattered around the room like the aftermath of a storm. I stayed on the couch for a long time after that, finishing my wine and then pouring another glass, watching the shadows shift as the tree lights cycled through their pattern, 3 seconds on, 1 second off. Illuminate, darken, repeat. Somewhere upstairs, my children were sleeping, dreaming their uncomplicated dreams. My wife was lying awake in our bed, probably crying, probably hating me, probably wondering how we'd gotten here. And tomorrow morning, before the sun came up, I'd pack my car and drive away from all of it. The guilt was enormous, crushing. But underneath it, like water under ice, I could feel something else. Relief. I was really doing this. God help me. I was really leaving. The alarm went off at 4:47 a.m., 13 minutes before I'd set it. Because I'd been awake since 3, watching the digital clock numbers change and listening to Jennifer breathe beside me in the dark. She'd come to bed around midnight. I'd followed an hour later, and we'd laid on opposite sides of the mattress, like two continents that had drifted apart, separated by an ocean of blankets and unspoken words. I silenced the alarm before it could fully sound and slipped out of bed as quietly as 13 years of practice had taught me. Jennifer didn't stir, or pretended not to. In the darkness, it was impossible to tell if she was asleep or just giving me the gift of not having to say goodbye again. I dressed in the bathroom with the door closed. Jeans, thermal shirt, the thick wool sweater my mother had given me 3 Christmases ago that I'd barely worn because it was too nice for everyday life. But this wasn't everyday life anymore. This was something else entirely. My suitcase was already in the car, loaded last night after everyone had gone to bed. I'd moved through the dark house like a ghost, gathering the last things I'd need. Phone charger, laptop, the journal I'd bought 6 months ago and never written in, because there was never time, never space, never permission to sit with my own thoughts long enough to commit them to paper. Now I crept down the stairs, avoiding the 3rd step that creaked, the habit of a parent who'd spent years navigating this house in the dark to avoid waking children. In the kitchen, the coffee maker was already set to auto brew at 5. I'd have to leave before it started, before the smell of coffee woke Jennifer, before the morning routine began and pulled me back into its gravitational field. I pulled on my winter coat, my boots. The keys were in my pocket, cold metal against my fingers. Everything was ready. I'd planned this like a military operation, car loaded, route mapped, cabin reservation confirmed. All that was left was to walk out the door. I should have just left, should have disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness and let the note I'd written last night speak for me. But I found myself climbing the stairs one more time, moving down the hallway to Emma's room. She was asleep on her side, one arm thrown over Mr. Whiskers, the stuffed cat she'd had since she was 2. Her hair was tangled across her pillow, her face peaceful in that boneless way children sleep. I stood in the doorway watching her breathe, trying to memorize this moment the last morning she'd wake up thinking I was just downstairs making breakfast like always. I'm sorry, I thought, but didn't say. I'm sorry I have to hurt you to save myself. I'm sorry you're 7 years old and learning that people leave. I'm sorry I can't be the dad you deserve until I figure out how to be a person first. I moved to Jack's room next. He was sprawled across his bed like a starfish, blankets kicked off, one foot dangling off the edge. 5 years old and already so certain the world would catch him if he fell. I pulled the blanket back over him, and he made a small sound, shifting but not waking. Take care of your sister, I thought. She's going to need you this week. Be 5 and uncomplicated and don't understand why this is hard. Give her that gift. Then, I was back in the hallway, and Jennifer was standing in our bedroom doorway. We stared at each other in the dim light filtering up from the downstairs nightlight. She was wearing my old college t-shirt again, her arms wrapped around herself, her face unreadable. I wasn't sure you'd actually do it, she whispered. I know. Part of me thought you'd wake up this morning and change your mind. I thought about it, and I'm still leaving. She nodded, like she'd expected that answer, but needed to hear it anyway. The notes on the kitchen table? Yeah, for the kids, to read when they wake up. What does it say? That I love them, that this isn't their fault, that I'll call tonight. I paused. The same things I told Emma last night. She cried herself to sleep. Jennifer's voice was flat, factual. Jack asked me 3 times if you were really coming back. The guilt was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest like stones. But I'd learned something in the past few weeks. Guilt wasn't the same as wrong. You could feel terrible about something and still need to do it. I should go, I said. Yeah. But she didn't move from the doorway, and I didn't move from the hallway. And we stood there in the pre-dawn darkness, like 2 people who'd forgotten how to stop being married. Jennifer, don't. She held up a hand. Don't explain again. Don't apologize again. Just go. Do what you need to do. Will you be okay? With everything? Do I have a choice? I could. What? Stay? We both know you can't. Not really. You're already gone, Daniel. You have been for a while. You're just finally making it physical. The accuracy of it hit like a slap. She was right. I'd been leaving in increments for months, maybe years, checking out of conversations, going through motions, being present in body but absent in every way that mattered. This was just the culmination of a process that had started long before I'd booked a cabin. I'm sorry, I said anyway. I know you are. Doesn't change anything, but I know. She looked past me, toward the kids' rooms. Take care of yourself. Figure your shit out. And when you come back, if you come back, we'll deal with whatever comes next. If? You said it yourself last night. You don't know what you want. Maybe you'll get up there and realize you want out. Maybe the distance will feel so good you won't want to come back. Her voice cracked slightly. I have to prepare myself for that possibility. That's not, isn't it? You're leaving your family a week before Christmas. You're missing your daughter's concert. You're choosing solitude over everything we've built. How is that not you already wanting out? I didn't have an answer that wouldn't sound like a lie or a rationalization. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was just the first step in a longer goodbye, and I was too much of a coward to admit it. I'll call, I said finally, when I get there. So you know I made it safely. Okay, and I'll talk to the kids every day. Okay, and... Daniel. She said my name like a period at the end of a sentence. Go, before the sun comes up, before the kids wake up, before I start crying and you feel obligated to comfort me. Just go. So I went. Down the stairs, past the Christmas tree with its blinking lights still on from last night, through the kitchen where I'd sat yesterday morning planning this escape, through the mudroom where Jack's snow boots were lined up next to Emma's, through the door and into the December darkness. The cold hit immediately, sharp enough to make me gasp. The world was that particular shade of dark that comes just before dawn, everything outlined in shades of gray and black. My car was covered in frost, its windows opaque with ice. I should have started it earlier, let it warm up. I got in anyway, key in the ignition, engine turning over with a sound that seemed obscenely loud in the quiet suburban morning. The heater blasted cold air. The defrost started its slow work on the windshield. I could have gone back inside, waited in the warmth while the car warmed up. Instead, I put it in reverse and backed out of the driveway. One last look at the house. White siding, black shutters, Christmas lights along the roofline, wreath on the door. Every window dark except for the faint glow of the nightlight in the upstairs hallway. Somewhere inside, my children slept. My wife stood in the bedroom doorway, or maybe had gone back to bed, or maybe was sitting on the edge of the mattress, trying to figure out how her marriage had come to this. I put the car in drive and pulled away. The streets of our neighborhood were empty, houses dark, families asleep. I drove past the Hendersons' house where we'd been to countless barbecues, past the Patels where Emma had her first playdate, past the park where I'd taught Jack to ride his bike. A geography of my life for the past 8 years. Every corner holding some memory of the family I was leaving behind. At the stop sign at the end of our street, I paused. Left would take me toward the highway, toward the cabin, toward whatever waited for me in the mountains. Right would loop me back around, back to the house, back to the life I knew, even if it was killing me slowly. I sat there longer than necessary, my hand on the steering wheel, my breath fogging in the cold car. This was the last moment I could turn back. After this, I'd be on the highway, committed to the choice I'd made. After this, there would be no pretending it hadn't happened, no easy way to undo it. A light came on in one of the houses across the street, someone else waking early, starting their day. The normal world continuing its normal rhythms, while I sat at a stop sign trying to decide if I had the courage to save myself. I turned left. The highway was almost empty at this hour, just a few early commuters and semi-trucks making their long hauls. I merged into the light traffic and pointed the car north, away from the city, away from everything I knew. The sun was starting to think about rising, the eastern horizon going from black to deep blue to that particular shade of gray that means day is coming. My phone rang through the car's Bluetooth, Jennifer's name on the display. I almost didn't answer. Almost let it go to voicemail. But old habits die hard, and I was still conditioned to answer when my wife called. Hello? Emma woke up. Her voice was tight, controlled. She heard the car. She came into our room asking if you'd left already. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. What did you tell her? The truth. That you'd gone early to beat traffic. That you'd call her later. A pause. She asked me to call you, to see if you'd come back for just her concert. Just that one thing. The knife twisted deeper. Jen. I told her no. I told her you couldn't. But she wanted me to ask anyway. Another pause, longer this time. So I'm asking. Will you come back for her concert? I looked at the highway stretching ahead of me, at the exit signs counting down the miles I was putting between myself and home. I thought about turning around, about that 3-hour drive reversed, about walking into the school auditorium and seeing Emma's face light up when she saw me in the audience. And then I thought about what would happen after. The pressure to stay for dinner, for breakfast the next morning, for just one more day. The slow erosion of my resolve until I was back in the house, back in the role, back in the suffocation I'd just barely escaped. No, I said, and the word tasted like ash. I can't. Silence on the other end. Then, okay, I'll tell her. Tell her I'm sorry. I'll tell her you love her and you'll call tonight. That's all she needs to hear right now. Jen, I have to go. She's crying, and Jack just woke up asking what's wrong. Her voice hardened. Have a good trip, Daniel. I hope it's worth it. She hung up before I could respond. The silence in the car was absolute, broken only by the hum of the engine and the whisper of tires on asphalt. I kept driving. The landscape changed gradually as I left the city behind. Suburbs gave way to exurbs, strip malls to farmland, concrete to trees. The sun finally broke the horizon, turning the frost on the fields into diamonds, making the world look clean and new and full of possibility. My phone buzzed with texts. I ignored them, eyes on the road, hands on the wheel. Whatever messages were coming in, anger from Jennifer, confusion from the kids when they read my note, questions from Jennifer's sisters when they realized I wasn't coming, could wait. I was in the liminal space now, between the life I'd left and the solitude I was driving toward, and I needed to stay in that in-between place a little longer. The GPS said 2 hours and 17 minutes to my destination. I'd left the city at 5:23 a.m. I'd arrive at the cabin before 8. Before most people were even eating breakfast. Before the day really began. I stopped at a gas station an hour into the drive, one of those isolated places that served travelers on their way to somewhere else. The parking lot was nearly empty, just my car and a semi-truck on the far side. Inside, the fluorescent lights were harsh after the gentle dawn, and the coffee was industrial grade, terrible. But I bought 2 cups anyway, and a breakfast sandwich wrapped in plastic. The woman behind the counter was maybe 60, with kind eyes and the worn face of someone who'd worked nights for too long. Heading up to the mountains? She asked, making conversation the way people do when it's too early for real talk, but too late to stay silent. Yeah, a cabin for the week. Nice. Family trip? The question was innocent, automatic. She was just being friendly. But it hit me like a brick. I'd spent so long defining myself by my family that I didn't know how to answer questions about myself without referencing them. Solo trip, I said. And the words felt strange in my mouth. When had I last done anything solo? When had I last made a choice that was just for me? Even better, she said, ringing up my purchase. Sometimes you gotta get away from it all, you know. My husband, he goes fishing every spring. Drives me crazy that he leaves me with the kids for a whole weekend, but he always comes back happier, more like himself. Does he? I asked, genuinely curious. Come back more like himself? Every time. Says it's like hitting a reset button. Reminds him who he is when he's not just dad or honey or whatever. She handed me my change. You look like you could use a reset. I didn't know how to respond to that. Could she see it on my face? The desperation? The exhaustion? Was I that transparent? Drive safe, she said. Mountains can be tricky this time of year. Back in the car, I sat in the parking lot, eating my terrible sandwich and drinking my terrible coffee, watching the sun climb higher in a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. My phone showed 14 missed texts and 3 voicemails. I still didn't check them. Instead, I pulled out the journal I'd packed, the one that had sat empty for 6 months. I opened to the first page and wrote, December 20th, 6:47 a.m., somewhere between who I was and who I'm trying to become. Emma is crying. Jennifer is furious. Jack is confused. And I'm sitting in a gas station parking lot eating a breakfast sandwich and feeling like the worst person in the world. But I'm also feeling something else. Free. God help me. I'm starting to feel free. I closed the journal, finished my coffee, and got back on the highway. 1 more hour to the cabin. 1 more hour until I found out if this escape was salvation or just another form of cowardice. The mountains rose ahead of me, dark against the morning sky, and I drove toward them like a man driving toward his own reckoning. The cabin appeared like something out of a winter postcard, nestled among pines heavy with snow, smoke curling from a chimney I hadn't expected to see already burning. The property management company had said they'd prepare it, but I'd imagined arriving to a cold, dark space I'd have to warm into habitability. Instead, lights glowed in the windows, welcoming and almost accusatory in their warmth, as if the cabin itself was mocking me for needing this, for running away to manufactured comfort while my family dealt with the mess I'd left behind. I parked in the small clearing that served as a driveway and sat for a moment, engines still running, heat still blasting. This was it. The destination I'd been fixating on for 3 weeks. The geographic solution to an internal problem. Now that I was here, the enormity of what I'd done hit me like a wave. I'd actually left. I'd actually driven 3 hours away from my children, my wife, my entire life, to hide in the woods like some kind of modern hermit having a socially acceptable breakdown. My phone buzzed again. I'd been ignoring it for the last hour of the drive, but the notifications had been piling up with the persistence of water finding cracks in a dam. 23 missed texts now. 7 voicemails. I turned the phone face down on the passenger seat without looking. Later, I told myself. Deal with it later. I got out of the car, and the cold hit me immediately, sharper than it had been in the city. Cleaner somehow, like the air up here hadn't been breathed by enough people to make it stale. The silence was profound, broken only by the whisper of wind through pine trees and the distant sound of water that must be the lake the rental listing had mentioned. The cabin was larger than the photos had suggested. 2 stories of dark wood and large windows, with a wraparound deck that looked out over the frozen lake below. I grabbed my suitcase from the trunk and made my way to the front door, where I found a lockbox with the code the rental company had sent. Inside, the cabin was exactly what I'd imagined, and nothing like I'd expected. Yes, there were the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. Yes, there was the massive stone fireplace with a fire already crackling. Yes, there was the open-concept living space with exposed beams and rustic furniture that managed to be both aesthetically pleasing and actually comfortable. But there was also a stillness to the space that I wasn't prepared for, a silence so complete it had texture. I set my suitcase down, and the sound echoed through the empty rooms like a declaration. You're alone now. This is what you wanted. This is what you chose. I walked through the space slowly, cataloging. Kitchen with granite counters and high-end appliances. Living room with plush couches facing the fireplace. A dining table that could seat 8, but would seat only me. Stairs leading up to what I assumed were bedrooms. Everything was tasteful, expensive, designed for maximum comfort. Someone had left a welcome basket on the kitchen counter. Local coffee, artisan bread, fancy cheese, a bottle of red wine with a note. Enjoy your stay. Enjoy. As if this were a vacation. As if I were here for leisure rather than survival. I climbed the stairs and found 3 bedrooms, each with its own bathroom. I chose the master, not because I deserved it, but because the view was better floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the lake and the mountains beyond. The bed was enormous, piled high with white linens and throw pillows. Everything was pristine, untouched, waiting for me to disturb its perfection. I unpacked mechanically, hanging clothes in the closet, setting my toiletries in the bathroom, placing my laptop on the desk in the corner. Normal actions, the kind I'd done hundreds of times in hotels, on business trips. Except this wasn't a business trip, and I wasn't going home in 2 days. When I was done, I stood at the window, looking out at the landscape. The lake was frozen solid, a sheet of white stretching toward distant tree-covered hills. Snow was falling now, light flurries that caught the morning light and turned the world into a snow globe. It was breathtakingly beautiful, the kind of view people paid thousands of dollars to experience, and I felt absolutely nothing. That wasn't quite true. I felt exhausted, hollowed out, like I'd been running on adrenaline for 3 weeks, and the moment I'd stopped, everything had caught up with me at once. My hands were shaking. My chest felt tight. The silence that had seemed profound 5 minutes ago now felt oppressive, like pressure building in my ears. I pulled out my phone. 27 texts now. I made myself look. Emma won't stop crying. I hope you're happy. Madison and Stephanie land in 4 hours. I have no idea how I'm going to explain this. Jennifer, Jack keeps asking when you're coming back. What am I supposed to tell him? Jen told me about your work emergency. So sorry. Don't worry about us. We'll manage. Hope everything's okay. The lie Jennifer had told, covering for me even while she was furious, giving me an alibi I hadn't asked for and probably didn't deserve. Thinking of you during this stressful time. Family comes first. We totally understand. More lies. More cover. Jennifer protecting me, even as I abandoned her. Then further down, one from Emma, sent at 7:14 a.m., Dad, please come back for my concert. Please. I'll be good. I promise. The message destroyed me. That I'll be good, I promise. As if her behavior had anything to do with my leaving. As if she could somehow earn my presence through better conduct. 7 years old and already learning to make herself smaller, to negotiate for love that should have been unconditional. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in my shaking hands, and felt the full weight of what I'd done. Not the abstract concept of leaving, but the concrete reality. My daughter thought she wasn't good enough to make me stay. My son didn't understand where I'd gone. My wife was lying to her family to protect me from the consequences of my own choices, and I was sitting in a luxury cabin with a view of a frozen lake, exactly where I'd planned to be, exactly what I'd fought for, and it felt like the worst mistake I'd ever made. I should call them. Should pick up the phone right now and call Emma. Explain that this had nothing to do with her, that she was perfect and loved, and this was about me, not her. Should call Jennifer and thank her for the cover story, even though I didn't ask for it. Should call everyone and apologize, and maybe even say I was coming home. Instead, I turned off my phone entirely. The silence that followed was absolute. No buzzing notifications, no demands, no one needing anything from me. Just me in the cabin, and the snow falling outside, and the question I'd been avoiding for 3 weeks. Now what? I'd been so focused on getting here, on executing the plan, that I hadn't actually thought about what I'd do once I arrived. What does someone do when they've run away from their life? Sit and think? Journal? Stare at the mountains and wait for enlightenment to strike like lightning? I went downstairs and opened the bottle of wine from the welcome basket even though it was only 8:47 inches the morning. Poured myself a glass and sat on the couch facing the fire, watching the flames dance and trying to feel something other than this growing sense of panic. The thing about silence is that it doesn't stay empty. Without the constant noise of family life, without Emma asking questions, Jack making demands, Jennifer coordinating logistics, my own thoughts had room to expand, and they were ugly, insistent things. You've made a terrible mistake. You've hurt your children to make a point about being hurt yourself. You're a coward who chose comfort over responsibility. You're going to lose everything, and for what? So you could drink wine at 9 a.m. in front of a fireplace you didn't build? I drank the wine faster than I should have, poured another glass, then made myself stop. Getting drunk wasn't the answer. Getting drunk was just another form of running away, and I'd done enough of that. The journal. I'd brought the journal. That was something concrete I could do. Something that felt purposeful, even if it was just another form of navel-gazing. I retrieved it from upstairs, Along with one of the books, I'd packed a novel about a man who goes into the wilderness to find himself, because apparently I'd decided to become a walking cliché. Back on the couch, I opened the journal to the second page and stared at the blank lines. What was I supposed to write? Dear Diary, today I abandoned my family and am now questioning all my life choices while drinking wine in the morning. How did you document a breakdown in real time? I started writing anyway. I'm here, 3 hours away from everyone I love, sitting in a cabin that costs more per night than I want to calculate, and I can't stop thinking about Emma's text. I'll be good, I promise. As if anything about this is her fault. As if she could be better, work harder, be more perfect, and that would somehow fix what's broken in me. Jennifer covered for me, told everyone it's a work emergency. Part of me is grateful I don't have to deal with Madison's judgment, or Stephanie's concern, or my parents' disappointment. But part of me is angry too. Why is she protecting me? Why is she making this easier when she should be letting me face the consequences of what I've done? Maybe because she's still trying to manage everything, still trying to control the narrative, or maybe because she actually loves me, even though I just blew up our lives a week before Christmas. I don't know what I'm doing here. I thought I needed space to think, but now that I have it, I don't want to think. I want to turn my brain off. I want to stop the constant loop of guilt and second-guessing and wondering if I've just destroyed my family for the sake of my own ego. The cabin is beautiful. The view is spectacular. Everything is exactly as I imagined it would be, and I've never felt worse in my entire life. I stopped writing and read back what I'd written. It was self-pitying and melodramatic, and probably exactly what I needed to get out of my head and onto paper. I closed the journal and looked around the cabin at the evidence of my grand escape. Expensive furniture, professional decorating, the kind of place where people came to celebrate anniversaries or have romantic getaways or pretend their lives were as aesthetically pleasing as their Instagram feeds suggested. I was here alone. By choice. This was what I'd wanted. The problem was that wanting something and being ready for it were two different things. I'd wanted space and silence and time to think. But I hadn't considered that space could feel like exile, that silence could amplify rather than quiet the chaos in my head, that time to think might just mean time to catalog all the ways I'd failed. My stomach growled. I'd barely eaten the gas station sandwich hours ago, and it was nearly 10 now. The kitchen was stocked with basics, according to the rental listing, and there was the bread and cheese from the welcome basket. I could make myself lunch. That was a concrete task. Something with clear parameters and an achievable goal. In the kitchen, I found the cabinets fully stocked. Pasta, rice, canned goods, spices, coffee, tea. The fridge had been stocked too. Milk, butter, eggs, bacon, vegetables. Someone had taken care to make sure whoever was renting this place wouldn't have to leave for groceries. It was thoughtful and efficient and made me feel even more isolated. I could stay here for a week and never see another person if I chose. Was that what I wanted? Complete isolation? Or had I just wanted isolation from my specific life, my specific responsibilities? I made a sandwich, the artisan bread, the fancy cheese, some mustard I found in the fridge. Sat at the dining table for one and ate mechanically, looking out the windows at the snow that was falling harder now, accumulating on the deck railing, turning the world into something clean and white and uncomplicated. After eating, I tried to read the book I'd brought. Made it 3 pages before I realized I hadn't absorbed a single word. Tried turning on the TV, yes. Even this remote cabin had a massive flat screen, but the channels were all Christmas specials and family movies and cheerful people celebrating together, which felt like the universe actively mocking me. I ended up back on the couch, staring at the fire, trying to remember what I'd imagined doing with all this time. In my fantasies of escape, I'd pictured myself finally relaxing, finally having space to breathe, finally being able to exist without constantly meeting someone else's needs. But I'd forgotten that I didn't actually know how to do that anymore. I didn't know how to relax. I didn't know what I wanted when there was no one else to want things from me. I'd spent so many years being a function, husband, father, provider, supporter, that I'd forgotten how to be a person. Maybe that was the real problem. Maybe I hadn't left to find myself. Maybe I'd left because there wasn't anything left to find. The thought was so depressing I almost laughed. Here I was, living every man's fantasy a week, alone in a luxury cabin, no responsibilities, no demands, complete freedom to do whatever I wanted, and I was having an existential crisis because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I got up and explored the cabin more thoroughly, found a game closet with board games designed for families, found a bookshelf with popular novels and local guidebooks, found a hot tub on the back deck, already heated, steam rising into the cold air, found all the amenities designed to make this the perfect getaway, and felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. By 2 p.m., I'd been at the cabin for 6 hours. It felt like 6 weeks. The silence was no longer peaceful, it was suffocating. The solitude I'd craved felt like punishment. The freedom to do anything felt like paralysis, because I didn't know what I actually wanted to do. I turned my phone back on. 41 missed texts, 12 voicemails, 3 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, probably Madison and Stephanie trying to reach me about the fake work emergency. And 1 text from Jennifer sent 20 minutes ago. Emma's concert starts in 3 hours. She asked me to text you one more time to ask if you'd come. I told her no, but she wanted me to try. So I'm trying. Are you coming? 3 hours. If I left right now, drove straight through without stopping, I could make it. I could walk into that auditorium and see Emma's face light up when she spotted me. I could be the dad who came back, who chose his daughter over his pride, who realized what actually mattered. I stood at the window with my phone in my hand, watching snow fall on a frozen lake, and tried to decide who I wanted to be. I didn't get in the car. I stood at that window for 20 minutes, phone in hand, keys in my pocket, watching the clock tick down the time it would take to drive home. At 2:23, I'd still have made it if I left immediately. At 2:31, I'd be cutting it close, but could probably arrive just as the concert started. At 2:47, I'd definitely miss the beginning, but could catch Emma's solo Silent Night was always toward the end of winter concerts. At 3, I sent a text to Jennifer, "I'm not coming. Please tell Emma I'm sorry and that I love her. I'll call her after the concert." The 3 dots appeared immediately. Jennifer typing a response, deleting it, typing again. Finally, "You're a coward." 2 words. Simple, devastating, probably accurate. I didn't respond. What could I say that wouldn't sound like justification, or self-pity, or more of the same rationalizations I'd been spinning for 3 weeks? I set the phone down and poured myself another glass of wine, even though the first one had gone to my head and I hadn't eaten anything since the sandwich at noon. The bottle was half empty now, and it wasn't even dinner time. At this rate, I'd drink my way through the whole week and return home pickled but not enlightened. The concert would start at 6. Emma would put on her navy dress with a white trim. Jennifer would do her hair in the French braid she'd learned from YouTube tutorials. Jack would complain about having to dress up but would ultimately wear the button-down shirt and khakis Jennifer had laid out for him. They'd take pictures at home, Emma smiling nervously, excited about her solo, scanning the frame for me even though she knew I wasn't there. Then, they'd drive to the school. Jennifer would text Madison and Stephanie with updates, probably. Would keep up the fiction of my work emergency, shielding me from the judgment I deserved. They'd find seats in the auditorium, good seats, because Jennifer would arrive early. Because that's what she did. She managed things. She made sure everything ran smoothly, even when I wasn't there to help. And when Emma walked onto that stage and scanned the audience for my face, she wouldn't find it. I drank more wine. The fire crackled. The snow continued falling. The cabin remained beautiful and silent and utterly indifferent to my crisis of conscience. At 4:37, I did something I'd been avoiding since I arrived. I checked my voicemails. The first was from Madison, bright and cheerful. "Hey, Daniel. Jen told us about your work crisis. That's such a bummer, especially at Christmas."
"Don't worry about picking us up. We'll just Uber. Focus on your work thing, and we'll see you when you get back. Tell your client they have terrible timing." Laughter. Then the beep.
The second was from my mother, concerned. "Daniel, honey, Jennifer mentioned you had to travel for work. I hope everything's all right. Call me when you get a chance. Love you." More lies spreading like ripples in water. More people I'd have to eventually tell the truth to or let Jennifer keep lying to indefinitely. The third voicemail made me sit down. Emma's voice, small and uncertain.
Hi, Daddy. It's me. Mom said you can't come to my concert because of work, but I just wanted to call and say it's okay if you're busy.
I know grown-ups have to work, but if you finish early, maybe you could come? I'm singing Silent Night, and Mrs. Patterson says I have the best voice in the class.
I've been practicing really hard. I wanted you to hear it, but it's okay if you can't. I love you. Bye.
The message had been left at 11:23 a.m., 5 hours ago. While I'd been sitting in this cabin drinking wine and feeling sorry for myself, Emma had been calling to give me permission to miss her concert. 7 years old and already learning to manage my disappointment by minimizing her own. I played it again, then again. Each time, her small voice saying, "It's okay, if you can't destroy me," a little more. The fourth voicemail was Jennifer, and her voice was ice. I told Emma you'd call after the concert. I don't care if you're drunk on expensive wine or having your Thoreau moment or whatever the hell you're doing up there. You call our daughter tonight and you tell her this wasn't about her. I'm done protecting you from the consequences of your choices, but I'm not letting Emma think she's not enough to make you stay. Call her, Daniel, or so help me God, I will drive up there and drag you back myself. The last 3 voicemails were from Jennifer's parents and my father, all checking in about the work emergency, all offering support, all buying the lie Jennifer was selling to keep our family's dysfunction private. I sat on the couch with the phone in my hand and the weight of my choices pressing down like an avalanche. Emma's voice on the voicemail, "It's okay if you can't," played on loop in my head. At what point had I taught my daughter that her needs were negotiable, that her father's presence was conditional, that she needed to earn love by being understanding and accommodating and good? I'd become my own worst fear. I'd turned into the kind of father who taught his daughter that men disappear, that you can't count on people to show up, that love has limits and conditions and breaking points. The concert was starting in 1 hour and 23 minutes. There was no scenario where I made it in time now, even if I left this instant. That door was closed. I'd let it close. I'd chosen this. I needed to do something, anything other than sit here drowning in guilt and cheap Cabernet. I went to the kitchen and drank 3 glasses of water, then made myself coffee even though it was after 5. I needed to sober up before the concert ended, before I had to call Emma and somehow explain why her father wasn't there. While the coffee brewed, I opened my laptop. Email beckoned work I could hide in, problems I could solve, a world where my value was clear and measurable. But I told work I was taking the week off for family reasons. More lies. Or maybe just irony so thick you could spread it on toast. Instead, I opened a blank document and started typing. Things I've learned in 12 hours of solitude. 1. Silence is louder than I expected. 2. Having space to think is only useful if you're brave enough to think hard things. 3. I don't actually know who I am without my roles. I'm dad, husband, employee, son, but who's Daniel? 4. Running away doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like cowardice with a nice view. 5. My daughter is learning to make herself smaller because of me. That might be the worst thing I've ever done. I stopped typing and read it back. 5 observations, and none of them were revelations. They were just obvious truths I'd been too busy or too scared or too deeply buried in resentment to acknowledge. The coffee finished brewing. I poured a cup and added milk, watching it swirl into clouds of white in the black liquid. Outside, the snow was still falling, heavier now, and I wondered if it was snowing at home, too. If Emma would look out the car window on the way to her concert and see snow falling, and think about how I'd promised we'd build a snowman together this winter. Promises I'd made before I'd realized I was drowning. Promises I'd intended to keep back when I still believed I could keep my head above water indefinitely. My phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. Concert starting. I told Emma you'd call right after. Don't make me a liar. I typed back, I'll call. I promise. 3 dots, appeared, then disappeared. No response. What was there to say? I spent the next hour in a strange state of suspended animation. I couldn't focus on anything, not the book, not TV, not the stunning view. I just sat with my coffee and watched the clock tick towards 7, when the concert would end and I'd have to face my daughter and try to explain the unexplainable. At 6:47, my phone rang. Jennifer. My heart seized. Something was wrong. Emma was hurt. There was an emergency. Hello? She was amazing. Jennifer's voice was thick with emotion, pride mixed with anger, mixed with something that might have been grief. Her solo. She was amazing, Daniel. She sang like an angel, and the whole auditorium went silent. And when she finished, she looked right at your empty seat, and I watched her face just fall. The words were knives, precise, aimed to hurt, successful. Jen, infected, she held it together, finished the concert, smiled for pictures, accepted compliments from her teacher. She's 7 years old, and she's already learned to perform happiness when she's heartbroken. Congratulations. You've taught our daughter to be as good at hiding her pain as you are. That's not fair. Fair? Her voice rose, then immediately dropped. She was somewhere public. Somewhere she had to maintain composure. You want to talk about fair? You're in a luxury cabin drinking wine, while I'm standing in a school parking lot trying to figure out how to tell our daughter why her father cares more about finding himself than being there for her biggest moment. It's not about caring more. Then what is it about, Daniel? Explain it to me. Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like you've decided your needs matter more than anyone else's. Your comfort, your space, your precious solitude, all of it, more important than your daughter's face when she realized you weren't coming. I had no defense, no rationalization that would sound like anything but selfishness. So I said the only true thing I had, I'm drowning, Jen. I've been drowning for so long I forgot what breathing felt like. Silence on the other end. Then, softer. So you decided to let the rest of us drown too? That's not. Emma's walking over. You need to talk to her now. And Daniel, you better make this good. Because I can't protect you from this. I can't spin this into something that doesn't hurt her. That's on you. I heard muffled voices. Then Emma. Daddy? The single word destroyed me. All the hope and hurt and love in that one syllable, Daddy, a word I suddenly didn't feel worthy of claiming. Hi, baby girl. I heard you were amazing tonight. Did you? Her voice was careful, uncertain. Did Mom tell you? She did. She said you sang like an angel. I wish you could have heard it for real. A pause. Why didn't you come? There it was. The question I'd been dreading. The one that deserved an answer that was both honest and age-appropriate, that acknowledged the hurt without making it worse, that somehow explained the unexplainable. Remember how we talked about how sometimes grown-ups need time alone to figure things out? Yeah. Well, I'm in that time right now, and I know I said I'd try to come to your concert, but I realized that if I came back just for one night, it would make the time alone thing not work. Does that make sense? Silence. Then, not really. Of course, it didn't make sense. It was nonsense, dressed up in therapeutic language, adult problems packaged in words too small to contain them. I'm sorry, Emma. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I wanted to be there, but I also needed to be here. Where's here? A cabin in the mountains. There's a lake and lots of snow and pine trees. That sounds pretty. When 100 parted by any one, it is pretty. Are you having fun? The question was so innocent, so painfully earnest. Was I having fun? Was that what she thought this was? Dad off having a good time while she sang her solo to an empty seat? No, sweetheart. I'm not having fun. I'm doing some hard thinking about grown-up stuff. Is it about me? Is it because I'm bad sometimes? There it was again, that terrible arithmetic of a child trying to solve for her own inadequacy. No, Emma. Listen to me. This has nothing to do with you. You are perfect. You are the best thing that's ever happened to me. This is about me needing to figure out how to be a better daddy, okay? But you're already good. The simple faith in those words, "you're already good," was almost unbearable. Thank you, baby. That means everything. But sometimes, even when we're trying hard, we need to take a break. and figure out how to do better. That's what I'm doing. Okay. She didn't sound convinced. When are you coming home? December 27th. 5 more days. That's a long time. I know, but I'm going to call you every single day. And when I get back, we're going to go ice skating, remember? Just you and me.
And hot chocolate after? The fanciest hot chocolate they make. With whipped cream and chocolate shavings? Mountains of whipped cream. Everest-sized portions.
She giggled a small sound, but genuine. That's too much whipped cream, Daddy. There's no such thing as too much whipped cream.
Mom says there is. She says too much sugar makes you hyper.
Well, Mom's not invited to our ice skating date, so we can have as much whipped cream as we want. Another giggle. Then, quieter. I miss you. And matey? The 3 words hit like a physical blow. I miss you too, Emma girl, so much. Can you call me tomorrow? Before bedtime? I promise. Every night before bed, okay?
Okay.
A pause. I love you, Daddy. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. That's what you always say. Because it's always true. I heard Jennifer's voice in the background, telling Emma it was time to go. Emma said goodbye and handed the phone back to her mother. Daniel? Jennifer's voice was quieter now, some of the anger drained out of it. Yeah? She's going to remember this. Not the concert, not her solo. She's going to remember that you weren't there. You know that, right? I know. Good. As long as you know what you've chosen. A pause. Madison and Stephanie arrive in an hour. I'm still telling them it's a work thing. But my mother's getting suspicious, and your dad called asking for details. This lie is getting complicated. You don't have to lie for me. I'm not lying for you. I'm lying for them. For Emma and Jack. They don't need to hear the aunts gossiping about how their father abandoned them at Christmas. They don't need that narrative in their heads. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm not doing it because I forgive you. I'm doing it because someone has to protect our children from the fallout of your choices, and apparently that someone is me. Her voice hardened again. Use this time, Daniel. Whatever you're doing up there, make it worth what it's costing us. Because if you come back and nothing's changed, if you come back and you're still the same person who needs to escape from his own life, then we're going to have a much harder conversation. I know. I have to go. Madison's texting that they just landed. Jen? What? I'm sorry. For all of it. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry. So am I. And then she hung up. I sat in the silent cabin with the phone in my hand and the taste of coffee and regret in my mouth. Outside, it was fully dark now, the snow still falling in the yellow glow of the porch lights. The fire had burned down to embers. The wine bottle sat empty on the coffee table. Emma's voice echoed in my head. I wish you could have heard it for real. I'd never hear it for real. That moment was gone. Irretrievable. No matter what happened next, no matter how I tried to repair things, Emma would always remember that her father had chosen not to be there for one of the biggest moments of her 7-year-old life. I'd thought leaving would save me. I was starting to realize it might have just broken me in a different way. I woke up the next morning, Friday, December 21st, with a headache that was half dehydration, half existential dread. The cabin was cold. The fire had died completely sometime in the night. Through the windows, I could see fresh snow had fallen, maybe 6 inches, turning the world into something pristine and untouched. A blank page, a fresh start. Except I didn't feel fresh or new. I felt like someone who'd made a catastrophic mistake and was only now, in the cold light of morning, beginning to understand its magnitude. I made coffee and stood at the window watching the sun rise over the frozen lake. It was objectively beautiful, the kind of scene that would make a perfect desktop wallpaper or inspirational poster with some quote about new beginnings overlaid in tasteful script. But all I could think about was what was happening back home. Jennifer would be waking up to her first full day with 7 children and no help. Madison and Stephanie had arrived last night. By now they'd have realized the house wasn't prepared the way Jennifer's texts had promised. There would be no activity schedules from me. No craft supplies organized, no meal plan ready to execute. Jennifer would be scrambling to manage expectations she'd set based on labor I wasn't there to provide. And Emma and Jack would wake up to their second morning without me. Would Jack ask again when I was coming home? Would Emma put on a brave face for her cousins, hiding the hurt because she'd already learned that's what you do when people disappoint you? My phone showed 3 new texts, all from Jennifer, all sent between midnight and 2 a.m. The twins won't stop crying. Stephanie forgot their sound machine and they won't sleep without it. Madison's oldest threw up, all over the guest room. I'm doing laundry at 1 a.m. while you're presumably sleeping peacefully in your escape pod. I know you won't read these until morning. I know you've probably turned your phone off so you don't have to deal with the chaos you created. I just need you to know that this is hell. What you're doing to us is hell. I should have felt defensive. Should have wanted to point out that I'd offered to tell the truth, that Jennifer had chosen to maintain the fiction of a work emergency, that these were her sisters and her choice to host them. Should have reminded her that I'd been managing 7 kids' worth of chaos for weeks in my head while she made plans without me. But instead, I just felt tired and guilty and increasingly certain that I'd made a terrible miscalculation somewhere in my reasoning. I sat down with my coffee and opened my laptop. In the cold morning light, with my head pounding and my heart heavy, I opened the spreadsheet I'd created weeks ago. The one that had justified this entire escape: 87.5 hours of childcare, 23 activities I'd been volunteered for without consultation, the clear mathematical proof of my exploitation. I looked at it now with different eyes. Yes, the hours were real. Yes, I hadn't been consulted. Yes, it was objectively a lot to ask of one person. But I'd never said no. I'd never pushed back. I'd never had a single conversation about boundaries or capacity or fair distribution of labor. I just silently resented it, tallied it up like evidence, and used it to justify abandoning my family a week before Christmas. I'd been so focused on being right that I'd forgotten to be honest. Not honest with Jennifer about my limits, honest with myself about what I actually wanted. Did I want my marriage to be more equitable? Yes. Did I want to be seen as a whole person rather than a function? Absolutely. Did I want time to exist outside my roles as husband and father? Without question. But did I want this? Did I want to be alone in a cabin while my daughter cried herself to sleep thinking she wasn't good enough? Did I want to punish Jennifer for not reading my mind by leaving her to drown in the chaos I'd spent weeks secretly documenting? Did I want to teach my children that when things get hard, you run away? I closed the laptop and put my head in my hands. The problem wasn't that I'd left. The problem was how I'd left. The problem was the timing, the method, the complete lack of actual communication before the nuclear option. I'd gone from 0 to abandonment without any stops in between for conversation, negotiation, therapy, or any of the normal steps people take when their marriage is in crisis. I'd acted like someone who'd been abused, exploited, trapped, with no options. But the truth, I was only now beginning to see clearly, was that I'd had options all along. I just hadn't used them, because using them would have required the kind of confrontation and discomfort I'd spent my whole life avoiding. It was easier to be the martyr, easier to silently accumulate resentment and then explode it all at once in a grand dramatic gesture. Easier to make Jennifer the villain of my story than to acknowledge my own role in creating the dynamic I'd grown to hate. My phone rang. Not Jennifer this time, my mother. I almost didn't answer, but my mother had a sixth sense for when I was avoiding things, and she'd just keep calling until I picked up. "Hi, Mom." "Daniel." Her voice was careful, probing. "Jennifer said you're traveling for work, but your father called your office yesterday and they said you'd taken the week off for family reasons." Of course my father would fact-check the lie. He was a lawyer. Verifying stories was basically his job description. "Mom, where are you really?" I could lie, could maintain Jennifer's cover story, spin some elaborate tale about a last-minute client emergency that wasn't on the official books, could protect the fiction a little longer. Instead, I said, "A cabin in the mountains, alone." The silence that followed was dense with everything my mother wasn't saying. I could hear her processing, assembling pieces, arriving at conclusions. "You left," she said finally, "a week before Christmas. You left Jennifer alone with the kids and her sister's children. You left. Yes. Why? It was the same question everyone kept asking, and I still didn't have an answer that didn't sound like either self-pity or self-righteousness. Because I was drowning, I said. Because I couldn't breathe anymore. Because something had to give, and it was either leave temporarily or completely fall apart. So you chose to let your family fall apart instead. That's not what I will. I stopped. Was that what I'd done? I didn't think of it that way. How did you think of it? As self-preservation. As setting a boundary. As finally choosing myself for once, instead of being what everyone else needed.
And how's that working out?
The question wasn't sarcastic. My mother's voice was genuinely curious, almost gentle. How was it working out? I looked around the beautiful cabin, at the expensive amenities and the stunning view, at all the evidence of my successful escape.
Worse than I expected, I admitted.
Tell me. So I did. I told her about the spreadsheet, and the resentment, and the feeling of disappearing into my roles. I told her about the conversation with Jennifer and Emma's concert, and the growing certainty that I'd made everything worse instead of better. I told her about sitting in this cabin yesterday, drinking wine, and feeling more trapped than I'd felt at home. My mother listened without interrupting a skill she'd perfected over decades of being married to a man who needed to process out loud, and when I was done, she was quiet for a long moment. You know what your father did when he was about your age? She said finally. He had what they called back then a nervous breakdown. Locked himself in his office for 3 days. Wouldn't talk to anyone. Just sat in there crying and staring at the wall. I'd never heard this story. What happened? I broke down the door. Literally, used a hammer on the hinges because he wouldn't unlock it. And when I got in there, you know what he said? What? What? He said, I don't know how to do this anymore. I don't know how to be everything everyone needs. She paused. Sound familiar? Very. You know what I told him? What? I told him he was right. He couldn't be everything everyone needed. Nobody could. And trying to do it anyway wasn't noble. It was just another way of avoiding the actual problem, which was that he'd never learned to ask for help. He'd never learned to say, I can't do this, before it became, I can't do anything. He'd built his whole identity around being capable and strong and never needing support. And when that became unsustainable, he didn't know how to adapt. He only knew how to break. I felt something loosening in my chest, some tight knot of tension I'd been holding for weeks. So what did you do? We went to therapy. We had hard conversations. We redistributed labor in ways that felt unfair to both of us. Because fair isn't always equal, and equal isn't always possible. We learned how to communicate before the crisis point, instead of waiting until someone was locked in an office crying. Did it work? You tell me. We've been married 42 years, and your father hasn't locked himself in his office since. But I'm not, Dad, I said. This situation is different. Every situation is different, Daniel. But the pattern is the same. You waited until you couldn't breathe, and then you ran. And now, you're sitting in a cabin wondering if running was the right choice, because part of you knows that geographic distance doesn't solve internal problems. So, what should I have done? Talk to Jennifer. Weeks ago, months ago, whenever you first started feeling this way. Set boundaries before you needed to blow everything up to enforce them. Gone to therapy. Taken a weekend away. Any of the 100 things people do when they're struggling that don't involve abandoning their family a week before Christmas. The truth of it settled over me like snow, cold, heavy, undeniable. I fucked up, I said. Yes, my mother's voice was matter of fact. You did. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I don't know. Come home, I guess. Apologize. Try to fix things. Is that what you want? I stopped. What did I want? I want my marriage to be different. I want to be seen. I want to matter as a person, not just as a function. Then coming home and apologizing isn't enough. You need to come home with a plan, with specific, concrete things you want to change and ways to change them. Otherwise, you're just returning to the same dynamic that made you leave. But how do I know what to ask for? How do I know what's reasonable? You start by being honest. Not spreadsheet. Honest. Actual honest. You tell Jennifer that you're drowning and you need help and you don't know what help looks like, but you're willing to figure it out together. You admit that you handled this badly. You take responsibility for the hurt you've caused. And then you do the work. What work? Whatever work it takes. Therapy, marriage counseling, uncomfortable conversations, learning to communicate before you hit crisis mode. Learning to value yourself enough to speak up when things aren't working, instead of silently collecting grievances until you explode. I was quiet, absorbing this. Everything she was saying made sense, but it also meant admitting that this whole escape had been what? A mistake? A tantrum? A dramatic gesture that had hurt everyone and fixed nothing? What if Jennifer doesn't want to do the work? I asked. What if she's done with me after this? Then you deal with that. But you don't know until you try. And you can't try from a cabin 3 hours away. I'm supposed to be here until the 27th. Says who? I made a commitment to myself. To taking this time. To what, Daniel? To proving a point? To punishing Jennifer? To hiding from the consequences of your choices? Her voice was still gentle, but there was steel underneath. Taking time for yourself is healthy. Running away from your problems is not. And you're smart enough to know the difference. So, you think I should just come home? Give up? Admit I was wrong about everything? I think you should ask yourself what you're accomplishing by staying. If you're using this time to think deeply, to understand yourself better, to plan for real change, then stay. But if you're just sitting there feeling guilty and miserable and wishing you'd handled things differently, what's the point? I looked around the cabin. The fire was out. The view was beautiful but meaningless. I'd barely touched the books I'd brought. The journal had 3 pages filled with self-recrimination. I'd spent more time thinking about what was happening at home than I had thinking about myself. I'm not accomplishing anything, I admitted. Then maybe it's time to go home. But what do I say? How do I face them after this? You start with the truth. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I want to do better. And then you actually do better. What if it's too late? It's only too late if you decide it is. A pause. But Daniel, every day you stay away is another day. Emma thinks she's not enough to make you stay. Every day is another day Jack doesn't understand where his father went. Every day is another day Jennifer has to manage alone and resent you for it. So if you're going to come home, do it soon. Don't waste the rest of the week proving a point nobody needs proven. We talked for a few more minutes, logistics, reassurances, her promise not to tell my father I'd called because he'd just want to analyze the legal implications of temporary abandonment. Then she hung up, and I was alone again with my thoughts and my guilt and my growing certainty that she was right. I opened my laptop and looked at the cabin reservation. Non-refundable. I'd paid for the week. Walking away now meant eating the cost of the remaining days. But staying meant eating the cost of something far more expensive. My family's trust, my daughter's confidence, my marriage's already tenuous foundation. I pulled up the calendar. Today was Friday, the 21st. If I left now, I could be home by dinner time. I could walk in and face the music and start trying to repair what I'd broken. I could be there for the weekend, for Madison and Stephanie's visit, for all the chaos I'd tried to escape. Or I could stay, could keep hiding, could use the time I'd paid for, the solitude I'd fought for, the escape I'd planned for weeks. I thought about Emma's voice on the voicemail. I wish you could have heard it for real. I thought about Jennifer's text from 2 a.m. What you're doing to us is hell. I thought about my mother's question. What are you accomplishing by staying? I closed my laptop and started packing. The drive home felt longer than the drive away. Every mile, a small act of courage or cowardice, I still wasn't sure which. The snow had stopped, leaving the roads clear, but the landscape transformed, everything white and clean and deceptively simple, as if nature was mocking me. See? Things can change overnight. They just rarely change for the better. I'd texted Jennifer at 10:47 a.m., short and direct. I'm coming home. Be there by 2. Her response came 3 minutes later. Why? A reasonable question. One I'd spent the entire packing process trying to answer. Because I'd made a mistake? Because I missed them? Because sitting alone in a cabin had clarified nothing except that I was better at running than at facing things? I'd typed and deleted 5 responses before settling on, because I need to be there. We need to talk. Really talk. No response. Just the read receipt, mocking me, letting me know she'd seen it and chosen silence. Now, as I crossed back into the city limits, I felt my chest tightening. In 3 days, I'd managed to hurt everyone I loved, prove myself capable of abandonment, and accomplish exactly nothing in terms of self-discovery, except the realization that I was profoundly bad at being alone with myself. Some escape. Some grand gesture of self-preservation. I pulled into our driveway at 1:53 p.m. The house looked exactly as I'd left it. Christmas lights, wreath on the door, Jack's bike abandoned on the front lawn under a blanket of snow. Through the front window, I could see movement. Shadows of people inside living their lives without me. I sat in the car for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, trying to find the courage to walk through that door. What would I even say? Sorry I left. I'm bad at coping. Can we pretend this never happened? The front door opened. Jennifer stood there, arms crossed, face unreadable. She didn't wave, didn't smile, just stood there, waiting, making it clear I wasn't welcome, but wasn't explicitly barred either. I got out of the car. You're early, she said, as I approached. Traffic was light. The kids are at the park with Madison and Stephanie. I told them you'd be back tonight. Maybe. Didn't want to get their hopes up in case you changed your mind again. The barb landed cleanly. I deserve that. You deserve a lot more than that. She stepped aside, letting me enter. But the kids don't deserve to hear it, so we're going to be civil. The house was chaos toys everywhere. Air mattresses set up in the living room, the kitchen counter covered in snack debris and juice boxes. Evidence of the 7-child hurricane I'd left Jennifer to manage alone. How bad was it? I asked. Bad. She walked to the kitchen, started loading the dishwasher with aggressive precision. The twins cried for 3 hours straight the first night. Madison's middle son gave everyone lice. Did you know lice spreads faster with 7 kids? I didn't. I do now. Stephanie's been having panic attacks because her husband's deployment got extended. Emma cried herself to sleep every night. Jack peed his bed twice, which he hasn't done in 2 years. And her voice cracked. I had to hold it all together while lying to everyone about where you were and why. I'm sorry. I don't want to hear sorry. She slammed the dishwasher closed. Sorry doesn't change what happened. Sorry doesn't unmiss Emma's concert. Sorry doesn't give me back the 3 days I spent managing a situation you helped create and then abandoned. You're right. She turned to face me, and her eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. So why are you here? You paid for a week. Why come back now? Because my mother called and asked me what I was accomplishing up there, and I realized the answer was nothing. Because I've spent 3 days feeling guilty instead of reflective. Because I stopped, made myself say the hard truth. Because I made a mistake, not in needing space, but in how I took it, when I took it. The complete lack of communication before the nuclear option. Jennifer leaned against the counter, studying me. You think coming home early fixes this? No, but staying away makes it worse. Does it? Because from where I'm standing, you leaving was the most honest you've been in years. You literally left rather than keep pretending everything was fine. Maybe that's actually progress. The observation caught me off guard. You think me abandoning you was progress? I think it forced a conversation we should have had years ago. She poured herself a glass of water, didn't offer me one. We weren't okay, Daniel. We haven't been okay for a long time. We were just both too busy or too scared to admit it. So, what do? I don't know. Therapy, probably. Hard conversations, definitely. We need to figure out how we got here and whether we can get somewhere better. She paused. But I need you to know if you ever leave like that again, without real conversation first, without trying every other option, I'm done. I can't be married to someone I can't trust to stay when things get hard. I understand. Do you? Because you spent 3 days in a cabin rather than 3 hours in an uncomfortable conversation. That's not a communication problem, Daniel. That's an avoidance problem. She was right. My mother was right. Everyone was right except me. I'm bad at confrontation. I admitted. I'm bad at speaking up before I'm drowning. I collect resentment like receipts and then cash them all in at once in the most destructive way possible. I know. And I'm bad at noticing when you're struggling because I'm so focused on managing logistics that I forget to check in with you as a person. She set her glass down. We're both bad at this. That's why we need help. Okay. Therapy. Hard conversations. Whatever it takes. I'm in. Jennifer studied me for a long moment. The kids will be home in an hour. Before they get here, I need to know, are you staying? Really staying? Because I can't put them through another goodbye. I'm staying. And Christmas? Madison and Stephanie leave the 26th. Can you handle that? I thought about the spreadsheet, the 87.5 hours, the careful documentation of my exploitation. Then I thought about my mother's words. Fair isn't always equal, and equal isn't always possible. I can handle it if we're honest about it, if we redistribute labor, if I'm allowed to say, I need a break, without it being a crisis. Done. I'll talk to my sisters. We'll figure it out together instead of me volunteering you without asking. We stood in the kitchen, two people who'd been married 13 years but had somehow forgotten how to be partners. The distance between us felt both enormous and surmountable, a gap that would take work to bridge but wasn't yet a chasm. I hurt Emma, I said quietly. That's the part I can't. You did, and you'll have to repair that. But Daniel? Her voice softened slightly. She still loves you. Kids are resilient like that. You didn't break her. You just taught her that people make mistakes and have to work to fix them. That's not the worst lesson. Through the window, I saw Madison's car pull up. Car doors opened, and children tumbled out, cousins chasing cousins, Madison corralling her boys, Stephanie carrying one twin while the other walked beside her. And then Emma, standing on the sidewalk, staring at my car in the driveway. She sees my car, I said. Then you better go out there. I walked to the front door, opened it, stepped out into the cold December afternoon. Emma stood frozen, her eyes wide, like she was afraid to believe what she was seeing. Hi, baby girl, I called. She ran. Full sprint across the snow-covered lawn, her winter coat flapping open, her hat falling off halfway. She crashed into me with enough force to nearly knock me over, her arms wrapping around my waist, her face pressed against my stomach. You came back, she sobbed. You came back early. I came back early. I confirmed, dropping to my knees so I could hold her properly. I'm sorry, Emma. I'm so sorry I missed your concert. I'm sorry I left. I made a mistake. It's okay, she said automatically. That terrible conditioning already setting in the need to make me feel better, to manage my guilt. No, I said firmly. It's not okay. What I did wasn't okay. You deserved better. You deserve a dad who shows up. I'm going to work really hard to be that dad, okay? She pulled back, her face streaked with tears and snot. Promise? I promise. And when I mess up, because I will mess up, I promise to admit it and fix it, instead of running away. Can we still go ice skating? Tomorrow, just you and me, mountains of whipped cream. She smiled, tentative, but real. Jack had noticed by now and was running over, tackling me from the side. Dad, you're home. Did you bring presents? Of course he'd ask about presents. 5-year-old priorities. No presents yet, buddy. But I brought something better. What? Me. The real me. Not the tired, grumpy version. The dad who actually shows up. Jack didn't fully understand, but he accepted it with the easy faith of young childhood. Madison and Stephanie approached more cautiously, questions in their eyes about the work emergency that had ended early. Crisis resolved, Jennifer said from the doorway, maintaining the fiction a little longer. Everything's fine. But she was looking at me when she said it, and her eyes were saying, This isn't fine yet, but it could be. If we do the work, if we're honest, if we stop performing normalcy and start building something real. I looked back at her over Emma's head and nodded. Not fine yet, but maybe, with effort and honesty and the courage to have hard conversations before they became crises, we could get there. The snow was starting to fall again, light flurries that caught in Emma's hair and landed on Jack's nose, making him sneeze. Christmas was in 4 days. The house was full of family and chaos, and all the noise I'd tried to escape. But this time, standing in my driveway with my children's arms around me and my wife's cautious hope visible in the doorway, the noise didn't sound like drowning. It sounded like home.